the child of destiny without her witcher. What if Ciri never met Geralt of Rivia? Let's explore the depths of it in this video. Cintra burns as Nilfgaard's banners climb the walls, the roar of siege engines drowning out the screams. Smoke rolls through the palace corridors, thick and choking, as the girl in the ashen cloak runs barefoot over shattered glass and fallen tapestries. She stumbles, reaches out through the haze for a rough, scarred hand that never comes. There is no gruff, white-haired witcher waiting in the courtyard. No horse called Roach cutting through the chaos. No calm voice telling her to keep her eyes forward and her fear quiet. For a moment, Ciri thinks she hears Steel Ring in her defense, imagines a monster slayer stepping from the smoke to claim his child of surprise, but the law of surprise has failed her here. Geralt never returned to Cintra, Calanthe never yielded the girl, and Destiny's neat little knot has come undone. As she runs, the world itself seems to hold its breath. This is the core fracture we're following, a continent where Ciri and Geralt never find each other. No reunion at a war-torn crossroads. No winter at Kaer Morhen with witchers barking drills and Triss trying to keep the boyish witchers in line. No slow, stubborn growth of a father-daughter bond that teaches both of them how to care and how to choose. He knows nothing of the girl's terror in these halls, and she can see no path that leads her to the path. Why does that absence matter? Because Ciri is not just a frightened princess fleeing a doomed kingdom. She is elder blood incarnate, the living echo of elven prophecy, a key that can open doors between worlds, or leave them to freeze beneath the white frost. In one future, she learns to ride, to parry, to rein in her power under a witcher's stern regard. In this one, that power coils untrained beneath her skin, waiting for the wrong moment or the wrong teacher to pull it free. Without Geralt's hand closing around hers in Cintra's last night, every balance on the continent begins to tilt. Nilfgaard's black sun rises higher, unchallenged by the strange, stubborn family that once formed around the girl in Kaer Morhen's ruined halls. The northern kingdoms lose more than a symbol. They lose the one person who might have stood astride their borders and the spaces between worlds. Still, they are hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again without scheming. The Lodge of Sorceresses watches for her. Emir's agents hunt. The rats wait on blood-slick roads. This matter is not up for debate for Destiny, even if its chosen champions never meet. In this story, we will follow Ciri through alternate childhoods. A Cintran ward clinging to Calanthe's fading shadow, a Nilfgaardian prize groomed in a golden cage, a runaway swallowed by gangs and war, or a secret weapon molded by the Lodge. We will watch how the wars between Nilfgaard and the North shift without a witcher's blade at her side, and what becomes of Yennefer, Triss, the last witchers of Kaer Morhen, and the ambitious sorceresses who think they can harness elder blood. As he rides alone through the wilds in this timeline, Geralt feels only a faint, unnameable pull, a silence where something should have been. He begins to sense that a promise he never kept has cost the world more than he can see. The question is simple. When you break one bond between two people, how far through time and space do the cracks really spread? Rewinding Destiny, how canon ties Ciri to Geralt. To understand what that broken promise really means, we have to rewind to the moments where Destiny, on the page, ties these two people together so tightly that pulling them apart feels almost obscene. The continent does not begin with Ciri running through burning streets. It begins in a banquet hall, with a hedgehog knight, a furious queen, and a witcher who thinks he's only asking for a meal. Geralt saves Duny's life, and half in jest, calls on the law of surprise. He knows the words, the old custom, but for a moment, he treats it as something distant, almost ceremonial. Duny agrees. Pavetta clutches her stomach, and the hall realizes, one heartbeat too late, that the reward has already been conceived, an unborn child, promised before she has a name. It should have ended there. Geralt walks away, refusing to take the baby. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again when fate crosses their paths a second time. Years later, on the road, he finds a lost girl in a forest and does not yet see the echo of that banquet. She is just a child, hungry and stubborn, trailing behind his horse. Only when names are traded does the web snap tight. Cirilla, Cintra, the child of Duny and Pavetta, Destiny has circled back, this time leaving him no room to slip away. This matter is not up for debate, the story seems to say. From that point in canon, their paths are one. Cintra falls, that much is fixed. Nilfgaard still rises in black and gold, and the lioness of Cintra chooses death over chains. Ciri flees through smoke and corpses, through refugee camps and bandit roads, until she finds him again, and this time, he does not let go. Under Geralt's protection, she learns the sword at Caer Morhen, running drills in the snow as he corrects her stance, and the old witchers grumble over her footwork. With Yennefer, she learns to shape the chaos inside her, to breathe through pain, to stand before mages who would dissect her bloodline, and refuse to bow. But what Geralt gives her is not only steel and scars. As he watches her spar, he can see the way she studies his silences, his refusals to take coin from the desperate, the way he turns from easy cruelty. He gives her a moral compass that is rough, inconsistent, human. He gives her a chosen family, Vesemir's gruff patience, Lambert's barbed teasing, Triss's concern, Yennefer's fierce conditional tenderness that slowly becomes unconditional. Through them, the boy of prophecy in another story becomes, in this one, a girl who can look at her elder blood and see more than a weapon or a curse. Canon drives her toward the white frost, toward a gate only she can open or close. Elder blood is the key, but who taught the hand that holds it? Let's explore the depths of it. Some events are fixed points. Cintra burns, Nilfgaard marches, the white frost looms. The flexible paths lie in who finds Ciri on the road, who names her, who tells her what she is allowed to be. So if we pull Geralt out of this chain of oaths and coincidences, if the Witcher never claims the Child of Surprise, who steps into that empty space first, Calanthe's iron will, Nilfgaard's black banners, the patient schemes of the mages, or the simple, brutal chaos of the roads, breaking the law of surprise, the moment destiny misfires. In this timeline, the chain does not snap on the road or in a forest. It breaks in a throne room, under chandeliers and banners, as Calanthe makes a decision she will never put into words. The law of surprise is invoked, the child of destiny is owed, and for a moment, destiny stands in the doorway, waiting to be let in. Duny and Pavetta survive their storm of steel and magic. The curse is lifted, the boar's blood dries on the marble, and the guests begin to breathe again. In canon, this is where the path bends toward Geralt, his offhand claim, his refusal of gold, the casual "give me that which you already have but do not know." Here, Calanthe watches the Witcher as he speaks, watches the way the hall looks at him, and he can see her jaw tightening with every heartbeat. She is the lioness of Cintra. She has outplayed usurpers, broken rebellions, and turned marriage pacts into weapons. She remembers prophecies whispered by druids and mages, all insisting that her line, her blood, will decide the fate of the North. And now this mutant, this professional killer raised in a ruined keep, claims a debt that might touch her unborn grandchild. Still, she was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again, not after seeing what blind faith in destiny did to Pavetta at that first banquet. So Calanthe smiles. She praises Geralt, thanks him, presses wine into his hand. She names him friend of Cintra, offers gifts he does not want, and when he mutters about the law of surprise, she waves it away with a queen's authority. The matter is not up for debate, Witcher. Cintra will remember, but there is no proclamation, no public acknowledgement that Pavetta is already with child. Servants are warned, midwives are bound by oath. When Ciri is born, her name becomes a state secret before she can draw breath. Geralt leaves. He knows courts are fickle, and he has no wish to wrestle a queen over a half-joking claim. He has monsters to hunt, contracts to fulfill. He begins to forget the feel of that night, the strange pull in his chest as the storm raged and Pavetta screamed. Without a named promise, without a child to imagine, the law of surprise becomes just another story he once walked through, and that small concealment cascades. There is no early visit to Cintra, no quiet moment where a white-haired Witcher watches a little girl stumble through her first sword forms in a courtyard. No reason for him to obsess over a child of destiny, no spectral Witcher shadow haunting Ciri's childhood games. Calanthe's political calculations harden instead. After the rebellion, after the near loss of her throne, she understands that a mysterious elder blood heir is safest under her direct control, a living weapon she can aim rather than surrender. So the banquet hall where, in another life, a Witcher might have stood and claimed a child remains strangely empty. The musicians play, the courtiers gossip, a draft stirs the tapestries where a white wolf's silhouette should have been. Somewhere beyond the walls, a horse snorts in the dark as Geralt rides north, unaware. Destiny does not roar or shatter the windows. It simply turns its head, steps past Cintra's gates, and begins searching for Ciri on roads where no Witcher waits. Who finds her first on those roads? Nilfgaard's scouts, a mage with orders from the lodge, or something far older that remembers elder blood? A princess of Cintra, only Ciri's alternate childhood, under Calanthe. Destiny passes Cintra by, but Ciri does not pass through untouched. She grows inside its walls, not as a wandering orphan on the road, but as a princess whose footsteps echo on marble instead of forest paths. Let's explore the depths of it. Her mornings begin in the training yard, not the library. The Skellige huskarls drill her with blunted axes and short swords, barking corrections in rough island accents as she circles in the sand. She learns to plant her feet, to take a blow on the shield rim, to fall and rise again before the opponent can press the advantage. Salt-stiffened banners from Skellige hang above, and for a moment, she imagines the crash of waves instead of the clatter of steel. After the yard comes the hall. Court tutors straighten her shoulders, correct the angle of her curtsy, drill her on the sigils of Redania, Temeria, Cadwin. She can see their patience fray when she fidgets, eyes wandering toward the windows and the distant sea. There are lessons in diplomacy, in when to smile, and when to let silence answer an insult. But there are no stories of witchers told by someone who has stood before a lesson and lived. Monsters remain bedtime tales, not case studies. Calanthe watches all of this with a hunter's focus. The lioness does not waste words on comfort. Her love is a command to endure. She walks with Ciri along the battlements, pointing out weak spots in the walls, naming the lords who would bend the knee and the ones who would wait to see which way the wind blows. This matter is not up for debate, she tells the girl whenever Ciri balks at another lesson in statecraft. A queen cannot afford softness. Still, in rare, unguarded moments, Ciri catches her grandmother's hand, resting on her shoulder a heartbeat longer than necessary. Without Geralt's shadow on the horizon, Ciri's restlessness has nowhere to aim. She dreams not of roads and monsters, but of ships cutting through storm-dark water, of islands where no one knows her name. As she listens to Skellige captains argue over ale, she begins to imagine herself on their decks, free of heralds and tutors. She thinks this is simple rebellion against duty, the ordinary burden of a crown waiting on her brow. Her elder blood disagrees. It stirs in quiet, disobedient ways. Candles gutter when her temper spikes. Corridors seem to stretch or shorten when she runs, so that rooms do not always appear where they should. At night, she wakes with sand under her nails and the taste of foreign air in her mouth. Though she has never left Cintra, the mages who visit the court notice, but they do not understand, or pretend not to. Calanthe notices too. Still, she was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again. Another Pavetta losing control before half the court. So the queen buries it. She forbids talk of prophecies at table, dismisses strange incidents as childish fancies, moves Ciri away from anyone who asks too many questions. What is not named cannot be used against Cintra. For the girl, every uncontrolled surge becomes a private shame. She knows she is different, but she files it beside her titles: princess, heir, responsibility, not omen, not key to worlds. When a corridor bends wrong beneath her feet, she bites her tongue and straightens her dress, terrified someone will see. And beyond the walls, others are already looking. A Nilfgaardian spymaster hearing rumors of the gifted child, a sorceress in the north, calculating bloodlines. In a world where no witcher stands between Ciri and those designs, how long can Cintra's stone corridors keep her secret? The first crack, rumors of elder blood and the mage's attention. Those glances from beyond Cintra's walls do not fade, they multiply. Rumors, once stray sparks, begin to travel along the dry tinder of the continent's politics, and for a moment it seems as if every fire-lit hall has someone whispering about the same thing. A Cintran girl who falls and does not bleed, who disappears in corridors that have no doors. It starts small. A court sorcerer in Verdun hears from a passing Skellige trader that Queen Calanthe's granddaughter has uncanny luck at the dice board, that the pieces jump where she wills them. A Skellige seer, half drunk on mead and stormlight, dreams of a child standing on a shore of frost, while ships burn behind her. In Nilfgaard, a spymaster notes 3 separate reports of a Cintran princess who wanders during fevers and wakes with sand in her hair when she has never left the keep. He begins to underline those lines, again and again, as he can see a pattern where others see only gossip. Within the Brotherhood of Sorcerers, the talk takes on a colder tone. Elder blood is an equation to them, a formula for power refined over generations, and Ciri is simply the next variable. They speak of Lara Doran's line not as a child to protect, but as an asset to be positioned, a breeding line to be placed in the right bed at the right time so that the future itself can be negotiated. Let's explore the depths of it. For mages who have watched kings rise and fall, what is one more frightened girl weighed against the chance to shape prophecy? The lodge is not yet born, but the women who will found it are already watching. Philippa Eilhart, serving Redanian interests with a smile that never quite reaches her eyes, reads a genealogy of Cintran royalty, and pauses when she reaches Pavetta. The dates do not align. The stories of the storm at Pavetta's betrothal feast are too carefully buried. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again becomes, in her mind, a principle. Never let raw power remain in the hands of fools. She files Ciri away as a name to be claimed later. This matter is not up for debate. Vilgefortz, on the other hand, watches from farther away. As he studies the fractures in the world's magic, the thinning walls between spheres, reports of a girl who slips through space feel less like rumor and more like confirmation. He knows elder blood is not merely heritage, it is a key, and keys belong to those bold enough to seize them. Inside Cintra, Calanthe feels the pressure without knowing its full shape. She has mages at her court, Triss among them perhaps, but she treats them as she treats her generals, tools, not confidants. When Ciri wakes screaming from dreams of white frost, or claims she has seen places she has never ridden to, Calanthe's jaw tightens. She downplays the stories, snaps at servants to hold their tongues, and forbids the girl from speaking of it before the sorcerers. To invite their deep guidance would be to admit she cannot control her own blood. Still, the more she hides, the more valuable those secrets become. Nilfgaardian spies pay double for any scrap about Ciri's health. Northern kings ask careful, offhand questions at feasts. Philippa grows impatient at Cintra's closed doors. Vilgefortz grows intrigued. The continent is already circling, even if, for the moment, Ciri is only a girl staring out from a castle balcony, unaware that royal will and arcane ambition are on a collision course that no stone wall can hold back forever. Pattern break. What if Nilfgaard claims Ciri first? But for a moment, we leave that balcony behind. The bells of Cintra are not ringing for feasts now. They are screaming. The night of the fall comes on in fire and iron, streets running red as Nilfgaardian soldiers push through smoke-choked alleys. Calanthe stands on her walls in blood-slick armor, crown askew, watching her city die. In the canon we know, Ciri slips the noose, through a ship, through the forests, through blind fortune. Here, that thread snaps. Her escape route fails in something as small and merciless as a change in the wind. The ship she's bundled onto never clears the harbor. Black-sailed vessels, imperial and disciplined, close like jaws. Grappling hooks bite the rail. Men in black armor pour over the sides. Their movements efficient, practiced, terrifying in how little they hesitate when confronted with screaming children and desperate sailors. From Ciri's eyes, the world narrows to banners she does not know, and a language that rolls harsh and foreign over steel. Hand sees her, not roughly, but with a care that frightens her more than any blow. Refugees are pushed aside. No one looks twice at them, yet every gaze lingers on her. She can see it, the quick measuring glances, the way officers murmur to each other as he begins to understand that this is no nameless girl from a burning port. She is treated as cargo, but catalogued as treasure. A cloak is thrown over her, not to comfort her, but to conceal her. When she asks where they are taking her, the answer is simple and absolute. South. The word means nothing to the child. To the men in black, it means triumph. Emhyr learns of her long before he ever sees her. Intelligence reports. Intercepted orders from Cintra. Whispers from mages who feel the elder blood flare under stress. He knows the stories of Lara Doran. He knows what it would mean to put such a lineage on his throne. In this timeline, there is no chance encounter on a war-torn road, no white-haired witcher delivering destiny to his camp. There is method, there is magical confirmation, there is the quiet, chilling satisfaction of a man who has proof that his most dangerous asset is already in his hands. Politically, the game tilts overnight. Instead of hunting a ghost through the north, bleeding coin and soldiers to chase rumors of a lost princess, Emhyr has a living banner in his palace. He can raise Ciri as an imperial heir, educate her in the Black Sun of Nilfgaard, present her to the world as the rightful queen of Cintra, who has, of her own will, accepted southern protection. This matter is not up for debate in his court. Any lord who questions it, questions the empire's destiny itself. Let's explore the depths of it. Ciri grows up in a gilded cage, walls carved with marble instead of Cintran stone, windows looking out over the Alba rather than the sea. Tutors speak of the North as a land of rebels and traitors who abandoned her grandmother, who would have left the girl to die as the city burned. Stories of Geralt, of Witchers, never reach her. Stories of Emir's mercy do. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again. That is how he frames it to himself. The insult of his curse, the near loss of his bloodline, the chaos of a continent that refused his order. With Ciri beside him at ceremonies, in black and gold, the Empire's propaganda writes itself. Nilfgaard did not destroy Cintra. Nilfgaard saved its last scion from northern treachery. And in that framing lies the real fracture. Without the hard winters of Kaer Morhen, without Yennefer's brutal tenderness, without nights spent running through forests with only a witcher's hand to hold, does Ciri ever become the girl who would stand against the Empire? Or trained in strategy and sorcery by imperial tutors, does she become its sharpest blade, the living key to elder blood and white frost wielded not in defiance of Emir, but in his name? Because if the North ever sees her again in this world, it may not be as a frightened child fleeing war, but as the commander who brings it. Emir's daughter, Ciri as the heir of Nilfgaard. So if the North ever sees her again, it is not as a lost girl on a windswept field, but as the black sun rising over their walls. Because in this path, Ciri does not grow up in a ruined keep among gruff witchers and a sorceress who chooses her. She grows up in marble halls, under the eye of an emperor who claims her. In Nilfgaard, her childhood is measured in lessons, not stories. Tutors and strategy trace borders and supply lines across great maps, their ink always flowing south to north. They tell her the Empire brings roads, law, and grain, while the northern kings bicker over tithes and pride. History masters recite every slight, every rebellion, until, for a moment, Ciri can see the North not as home, but as a sullen, ungrateful vassal that must be corrected. Rhetoric instructors drill her in the art of command, how to speak so that men march, and how to pause so that they dare not refuse. Her elder blood is never a secret accident in the woods. Court mages, robed in black and gold, monitor her pulse and portals, counting each uncontrolled flicker of power as a potential disaster for the Empire. They teach discipline the way a general teaches drill, breathing exercises, geometric sigils, controlled openings into safer, empty spaces. It looks like care, but Ciri is sharp. She knows each lesson ends with a report to Emir, with calculations of how far his living weapon has progressed. This matter is not up for debate in Nilfgaard. Her gift exists to stabilize the realm, to end the White Frost on imperial terms, or to shatter the North if required. Emotionally, the court is colder than Kaer Morhen's stones ever were. Emir visits her rarely, always as he is, distant, composed, a ruler first, and a father second. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again. The chaos of Cintra, the uncertainty of succession, so his presence carries a weight she cannot ignore. Her closest bonds become a web of ambitious advisors and polished courtiers who see the girl as a future banner rather than a daughter. Perhaps there is one exception, a single sympathetic tutor, an older mage or historian who dares, in quiet moments, to mention Cintra not as a conquered province, but as a fallen kingdom with its own songs. Ciri's rebellious streak does not vanish, it mutates. She begins slipping past guards for secret rides beyond the city, trading embroidered cloaks for plain leather. She rides through villages rebuilt after conquest, hearing how the people speak when they think no one important is listening. She experiments with forbidden aspects of her magic, short, sharp jumps through space, a glimpse of snow, and spectral riders she does not mention in her official lessons. Each disobedience is small, deniable, but each plants another seed of doubt in the imperial narrative she has been fed. By the time she comes of age, the shape of the future is clear to everyone but her. Emir's counselors discuss her not as a person, but as timing, when to present the lost princess of Cintra to the world, when to place her at the head of legions crossing the Yaruga. She will ride north as living proof that Nilfgaard's wars are not invasions, but restorations in her name. And as she stands before a mirror in black and gold armor tailored to her frame, hearing the distant thunder of mustering troops, one question begins to haunt her steps. When the banners of the Empire finally shadow the lands of her birth, which side of the walls will she stand on? Because the next time the North hears the name Cirilla Fiona Ellen Rhiannon, it may be from the herald of an emperor, or from the lips of the empress who decides whether their kingdoms live or burn. The North, without its lion cub, political fallout of a lost Ciri. For the North, the first news of Ciri in Nilfgaardian hands lands not as a rumor, but as a wound. Bards whisper of a lion cub carried south in chains, and for a moment, every king and counselor has to decide whether that image is a call to arms or a convenient excuse to do nothing. In Redania, in Codwin, in Temeria, the reactions fracture along old fault lines. Some monarchs seize on Ciri's capture as a rallying cry, insisting that if Emir can parade the last of Sintra's line as his prize, then none of them are safe. Others, more tired or more pragmatic, close the door and tell their closest advisors that the girl is already lost, a bargaining chip that will never return to the table. They speak of grain levies and winter stores instead of banners and oaths, and he can see how quickly outrage cools when weighed against the cost of another war. Sintra itself becomes something colder. Without a hidden heir riding between worlds with a witcher at her side, its claim is no longer a living thread, but a memory. Skellige's Jarls sit over maps and mead, tracing the old sea routes to the Marnadal stairs, and one of them finally says aloud what the rest have been thinking. Are they willing to bleed ships and sons for a ghost kingdom? The answer does not come easily. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again. One of the older Jarls mutters, remembering the first Nilfgaardian banners on Sintran shores. Yet, even that resolve feels thinner when there is no girl to smuggle away, no Geralt slipping through back alleys with destiny under his cloak, because in this timeline, the absences are as loud as the armies. No lone witcher escorts a trembling refugee through a mountain pass. No white-haired swordsman pulls a drunk noble out of a tavern brawl who will later cast the deciding vote in a war council. A sorceress, who might have been rescued from a pogrom, dies instead in a gutter, and with her goes the spell she would have woven at Sodden. The board looks the same, but piece by piece, the quiet interventions that once tilted fate never happen. The mages feel that missing weight most keenly. In their hidden meetings, the lodge recalculates and finds only sharper edges. With Ciri openly under Emir's control, she is no longer a potential asset to be courted, but a living weapon pointed at their world. They begin to speak more freely of breeding programs, of stolen embryos, of seizing lesser elder bloodlines, and forcing destiny's hand. Riskier magical gambits, long-range portals into guarded palaces, assassination by summoned specters, even tampering with time itself, shift from mad theory to desperate option. This matter is not up for debate, one of them finally says, and the room falls silent because they all know she is right. So the continent edges toward a terrible question. If Ciri becomes the face of Nilfgaard, the empress in waiting whose crest hangs over every conquered gate, do the northern kingdoms harden into a war of extinction, or fracture under the weight of her contested legitimacy? Let's explore the depths of it as the first black standards appear on the horizon, and every lord must decide whether they are defying an emperor or a stolen queen. Yennefer's empty search, a sorceress without a daughter. If Ciri becomes the stolen queen of Nilfgaard, the north hardens around a symbol, but there is someone else who is meant to stand beside that girl, someone whose absence warps the story in quieter, sharper ways. Yennefer of Vengerberg remains what she has always been, brilliant, dangerous, and, in this timeline, fundamentally unanchored. Canon gives her a cruel arc and then a fragile mercy, a hunchbacked girl who clawed her way into power, who bartered her fertility for beauty and then discovered, too late, that the price was permanent. In the world we know, Ciri slips into that wound. The child of destiny becomes the daughter she never had, the one person who can look past the sorceress's armor and call her mother without fear. Take that away, and the ache never resolves. The wish at the Jinn's Lake is never tested by a child's stubborn love. Yennefer wakes each morning as the same woman who once stared at a baby in Aedirn and almost stole her, only now there is no future girl to forgive her for it. She does not retreat, she advances. With no Ciri to pull her toward Brokilon, Kaer Morhen, or ragged refugee trains, she stays where power is sharpest. At Aretuza and within the Brotherhood, she is the one who arrives on time to every conclave, the one who remembers every slight and every vote. She begins to rise faster, her reports on Nilfgaard precise, her counsel on Sintra's fall cold and unsentimental. When the Lodge of Sorceresses forms in the ashes of Thaned, she is not the reluctant mother dragged into politics by a child's safety. She is one of its architects, pen in hand, as he can see Philippa's quill scratching beside hers. Still, that ascent has a cost. Without the shared burden of a girl to protect, her bond with Geralt never roots itself. They still find each other in taverns and on battlefields, in ruined keeps, where monsters nest and kings whisper. But there is no winter spent at Kaer Morhen teaching a child to parry, no night where they argue over discipline and destiny instead of their own pride. Their love becomes a series of collisions rather than a life. He knows she will always choose the game over the path. She knows the boy with the white hair will always walk away before dawn. And yet, for a moment, something tugs. She dreams, on the eve of Cintra's sack, of a girl running down a burning corridor, ash tangled in ashen hair. She wakes with the taste of elder blood on her tongue, though she has never drunk it. Riding through Temeria months later, she feels a pull toward the south, toward Nilfgaard's black standards, and tells herself it is only strategy, only instinct. This matter is not up for debate. Feelings are for those who can afford them. Then the rumors reach the lodge. An elder blood princess, not dead, but enthroned in chains of silk and gold, a living key to prophecies the elves whisper and the mages fear. As he reads the first intercepted report aloud, Vilgefortz smiles. Philippa's eyes brighten with calculation. Yennefer says nothing. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again, and neither, she realizes, is she. Let's explore the depths of it as Yennefer is handed a dossier bearing Nilfgaard's seal, and a name that makes her hand tremble for reasons she cannot yet admit. Kaer Morhen's silence, witchers without their lion. Cub Yennefer's fingers tighten around the Nilfgaardian dossier, but the name that unnerves her does not yet belong to a child. Far to the north, another name is never spoken within ancient stone. Cirilla Fiona, Ellen Rhiannon, is not whispered through Kaer Morhen's cold halls, and that silence becomes its own kind of curse. In canon, one winter breaks the pattern. Snow piles against the keep's broken battlements as a thin, gray-eyed girl stumbles through the gate, wooden sword in hand, cursing Lambert under her breath. Vesemir watches from the steps, pretending to grumble as he corrects her stance. Eskel laughs when she knocks Geralt into the snow. For a moment, the fortress feels less like a tomb and more like a home, as he can see a future that is not only about contracts and corpses. The boy on the training yard is no longer the last child to run these paths. Here, that winter never comes. The snows still fall, but only on Geralt, Vesemir, Lambert, and Eskel, moving through drills they have repeated for decades. No shrill voice complaining about elixirs, no small boots clattering on the stairs. Just the wind, the creak of old wood, and the unspoken knowledge that no new witchers will ever be forged here again. Geralt returns from the path to a table laid for 4, not 5, and the empty place is not even noticed, because it was never set. He begins to feel the difference most sharply in the quiet. Without a child of surprise to train, his life collapses back into its old rhythm. Monster, reward, tavern, road. He knows every pattern by heart. A frightened alderman, a sneering noble, a bed shared for a night, a farewell at dawn. There is no girl asking why men fear what they do not understand. No small hand tugging his sleeve when he pretends not to care. His internal war about destiny never resolves. It just dulls, like a wound that never quite scabs over. That absence ripples outward. There is no young human girl in padded gambeson to soften hard eyes in Caedwynne courts. No lion cub of Kaer Morhen that bards whisper about. When Triss visits, she brings no red-cheeked child to the Gwent tables of nobles who might have seen, for a moment, that witchers can be guardians, not merely blades for hire. The keep remains a relic, not a refuge, a ruin tolerated, not a place anyone dreams of sending their frightened wards. Politically, the cost is brutal. With no elder blood ward under their roof, the witchers hold no living bargaining chip against kings who fear prophecy more than they fear monsters. There is no reason for the Lodge to argue that this crumbling fortress must be preserved, no excuse for sorcerers to tie Witcher survival to the fate of the continent. When Nilfgaard marches, no one says, "Protect Kaer Morhen, the girl is there." This matter is not up for debate because the girl, quite simply, is nowhere near them. Then comes the pattern interrupt that history never records. The last great tale of witchers is not of a white-haired hunter teaching a lost princess to parry destiny, blow for blow, but of an order that dwindles in the margins, doing its work until no one bothers to tell their stories. Let's explore the depths of it as winter after winter passes, and Geralt realizes that the world will end or endure without ever knowing what it meant that he once had a child of surprise and lost her before they even met. Alternate thread, Ciri on the roads, claimed by chaos. But what if destiny does not merely miss once, it slips twice, and never corrects itself? What if the child of surprise still flees burning Cintra, but this time no white-haired hunter waits on the road, no gravel voice calls her girl, and drags her back from the edge? Let's explore the depths of it as the story rewinds once more to the fall of the Lioness. The Nilfgaardian siege crashes down the same, screams in the corridors, smoke under the rafters, Calanthe's last stand on blood-slick stone. Ciri runs. This time, though, every narrow escape works a little too well. The skiff holds together in the storm. The rider, who might have met Geralt, is cut down by a stray bolt before he can ever reach the Witcher. The boy is nowhere near the right crossroads. He never even hears that a lone princess is on the run. For a moment, the pattern that once drew them together simply doesn't catch. On the roads, Ciri's world shrinks to hunger and cold, mud to her knees, fingers so numb she can barely hold stolen bread. She meets kindness in fragments, an old woman who lets her sleep in a barn, a peddler who presses a bruised apple into her hand and looks away from the Cintran crest hidden in her cloak. But cruelty finds her faster, a soldier's hand on her wrist, a boot on her chest. Panic rises, and with it, something older than the kingdoms themselves. Space twists. Snowflakes hang motionless as he reaches for her, then streak sideways as the world lurches. Ciri does not cast a spell so much as tear through reality in blind terror. One heartbeat she is in a ditch beside the road. The next she is standing in a forest where the trees are wrong and the stars burn in unfamiliar patterns. She doesn't know what she's done. She only knows that every time the fear crests, the world breaks to let her through. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again. Not the drunken father, not the tired king, but the pattern of the continent itself. Each uncontrolled surge leaves scars, rings of withered grass, frozen ponds in high summer, echoes of voices in languages no one living speaks. Monsters feel those places first, then mages, then bounty hunters with vague orders about a girl who leaves storms behind her. No Witcher arrives to explain. No calm, exhausted man tells her to breathe, to wait, to parry instead of strike. Instead, the first people who truly stay are the rats. Young, armed, and laughing too loudly in the dark, they find Ciri half-starved after one of her jumps goes wrong and dumps her in a roadside ditch miles from anywhere. They take her in, but their mercy is edged with steel. If she wants to eat, she rides with them. If she wants to belong, she learns their rules. Take what you can, strike first, never bow. With them, Ciri begins to feel powerful instead of hunted. She can see how a flicker of her gifts turns an ambush into slaughter, how a slip in her temper sends a guard tower's stones shuddering apart. There is a thrill in it, a savage joy that no one tempers with talk of consequences or prophecy. This matter is not up for debate among the rats. The world took everything from them, so they will take back what they please. Yet each victory feeds the storm. Her elder blood answers fear and rage more quickly than thought. One misstep on a plundered bridge, one scream too sharp in a burning village, and the air tears open wider than before. If no one teaches her restraint, if no one stands between her and the abyss, does Ciri remain a frightened girl with a sword, or become the very catastrophe the prophecies feared, walking the roads with a gang that mistakes the end of worlds for a good night's work? The rat's Ciri, power without guidance. So in this branch of the story, Ciri does not step into Kaer Morhen's cold halls or Yennefer's perfumed studies. She vanishes instead into a different kind of school, the back alleys and black roads of the rats. Their world is built out of ambush points and escape routes. Rotting wagons left on narrow tracks become cover for crossbows. Ditches and culverts are hiding places where the boy with the quickest hands waits to cut a purse or a throat. At night, they ride hard along trade roads, lanterns hooded, eyes sharp for fat caravans and lone nobles, and by dawn, they are sprawled on stolen silks, drinking sour wine and laughing over gold they did not earn. There is a code, yes, but it is small and vicious. Loyalty to the gang, revenge for any slight, and survival above all. Ciri fits into it because she must. At first she tells herself they only rob the cruel, only strike at Nilfgaardian patrols, and lords who sneer at starving peasants. But there is no Geralt here to stop her hand when a merchant begs, no Yennefer to ask what this will look like in 10 years. One guard spits on her boot and calls her a wretch. The next week, any man in that same uniform is fair game. Justice narrows to an equation, us or them. If a village refuses them shelter, its barns burn. If a captain kills one rat, 3 of his men die choking in the dust. Let's explore the depths of it. Without anyone to argue that mercy is strength, cruelty begins to feel like clarity. Her power grows in this pressure cooker. At first, it's a stumble in the dark forest, a flash of panic as he swings a blade at her and she is suddenly behind him, sword already at his throat. Then it becomes a tactic. She blinks from saddle to wagon top in the space of a heartbeat, cutting reins, vanishing before arrows fly. In taverns, rumors spread of a ghost girl who steps through steel and shadow, who cannot be cornered. Still, she is hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again when the rats are threatened. Each raid, she pushes harder, testing how far she can slip between places. The cost is written in blood she did not mean to spill. One night, cornered in a barn, she reaches for the path between doors and instead tears through a man's chest, leaving him twisted, eyes wide with a terror he has no words for. Another time, she tries to escape a noose and reappears 10 paces away, alone, while the boy who held her hand rematerializes half inside a stone wall. For a moment, the gang is silent, staring at what she has done. Then someone swears, someone else laughs too loudly, and the world lurches on, but the images stay with her. She begins waking in the dark, hand over her mouth, seeing those faces. She has no Witcher's medallion to grip, no sorceress to explain that power without discipline will always turn inward. She only has the rats, who clap her on the shoulder and tell her it was them or us. This matter is not up for debate, their leader says when she whispers that perhaps they should stop using her gifts so freely. They need her. The roads are harsher, Nilfgaard's patrols thicker, bounty posters bearing her scarred face nailed to every gate. So, on a rain-slick night, during a raid that should have been routine, everything finally snaps. Crossbow bolts hiss from the dark, horses scream, and as she reaches for the space between heartbeats, fear and fury collide. The air around her buckles. The road, the wagons, the screaming men all smear into white and green light. Reality itself splits open in front of her like rotten cloth, and on the other side, something old and hungry turns its gaze toward the little gang that thought the worst they could steal was coin. The White Frost, without a Witcher's shadow. For a moment, the rats think it is just another ambush gone wrong. Then the light fades, the screaming stops, and what's left on the road is wrong in a way even hardened cutthroats can feel in their bones. The air tastes of iron and snow. Breath steams in front of their mouths, though it is late summer. Hoarfrost crawls in delicate, crystalline veins across splintered wagonwood and dead men's cheeks. This is not weather. This is the White Frost, reaching through a tear it has no business touching yet. In the lore, whispered by mages and half-mad NL seers, the White Frost is not just a bad winter, not merely some distant age of ice. It is entropy given teeth. A cosmic cold front that sweeps through spheres, devouring heat, life, and magic, turning whole worlds into silent, frozen tombs. The elves tell it in prophecy, the humans turn it into half-remembered tales, but the shape is the same. At the end of all things, the frost comes, and the only real question is whether someone opens the right door at the wrong time. Ciri, in every version of this story, is that door. Canon gives her a name for it, a key. Elder blood condensed into a single, frightened girl who can feel the seams between worlds and, with a thought or a scream, force them wider. She can fling herself to distant spheres, drag others through behind her, or, if guided, steer entire civilizations away from the path of annihilation. He knows that in the main timeline, Geralt and Yennefer spend years turning that raw, panicked talent into something deliberate. They tell her she is not a weapon to be used or a monster to be feared, but a person who can choose. Here, no one tells her that. Riding with the rats, Ciri has no Witcher's code, no sorceress's lectures about responsibility. She has only the memory of fire and Nilfgaardian banners, the sting of betrayal, the echo of Calanthe's fall. Her power is a curse she tries to outrun, not a burden she learns to carry. When terror grips her, she doesn't center herself with Kaer Morhen drills. She lashes out. The world tears. The frost peers through. At first, it is small. A village well that ices over in the height of spring. A battlefield where corpses freeze solid in moments. Steel snapping as men try to pry swords from dead hands. A forest glade where time slows and snow falls in a perfect circle, untouched a week later, while the rest of the wood steams in summer rain. Each breach is local, almost deniable. Still, he can see the pattern forming as she stumbles from one disaster to the next. fast. Every panic, every rage, accelerates the timetable of a catastrophe that should be centuries away. Let's explore the depths of it. The Lodge of Sorceresses, if they even manage to track these anomalies, will argue in dimly lit chambers about the source. Nilfgaard's astrologers will chart strange stars and colder seasons, muttering about omens, but the girl at the center of it all only knows that when she loses control, people die in ways that make no sense. So she hardens. She stops asking why. She begins to believe the world deserves what it gets. And here's the chilling question the continent never thought to prepare for. If the child of destiny grows up angry, traumatized, and utterly alone, does she choose to save a world that never saved her, or does she simply walk away and let the frost come? Because this matter is not up for debate in the eyes of prophecy, someone will open that final door. The only thing still uncertain is whether, when the moment comes and the sky turns white, Ciri turns her back, or turns her power against the cold itself. Pattern shift. The Lodge moves. First Prophecy may not care what Ciri chooses, but there are others on the continent who do, and not out of concern for her soul. While she runs, half-starved and half-feral through war-torn backroads, far away in polished marble halls, another power takes notice. The Lodge of Sorceresses, that quiet, ruthless shadow government, begins to move. They meet in hidden chambers above thrones and councils, wards layered so thick even other mages hear nothing but a pleasant ringing in their ears. To the kings of the north, these women are advisors, court ornaments, necessary evils. To themselves, they are the real continuity of rule. Monarchs die in battle or on hunting trips. Dynasties rot. Still, the Lodge endures, passing secrets hand to hand, treating crowns as pieces on a board, and elder blood as the ultimate trump card that can overturn the game entirely. Philippa Eilhart sits at the center of it as he begins to understand the pattern forming beneath the chaos of war. Reports from Redanian spies, half-burned Nilfgaardian dispatches, panicked letters from minor barons who swear a pale girl walked through their fortified borders as if the walls were mist. She can see the shape of it now. A young woman leaving impossible magical signatures, rips in space that smell of elder energies and winter. Their intelligence network tightens around that phantom. In Novigrad, a washerwoman, who is not a washerwoman at all, slips coins to dockhands who saw a girl vanish between ships. In Eidern, a hedge witch is quietly interrogated after babbling about a child who screamed in shattered mirrors across 3 villages. In the far south, magical scrying pools show flickers, never a full face, never a clear name, but always the same resonance. For a moment, even the most jaded of them feel a chill. This is not merely talent, this is a living key. Let's explore the depths of it from their perspective. Around the table, voices divide. Philippa speaks first, calm and clinical. Capture the girl, secure her lineage. Breed a controlled dynasty of elder blood under Lodge guidance, a line that can be steered away from prophecy's worst endings and toward their own stable hegemony. To her, this matter is not up for debate. The continent has bled too often from mad kings and wild magic. Better a caged storm than another white frost. Others push back. Kira, for all her ambition, asks what happens if the girl refuses. Francesca, thinking of lost elven children and shattered prophecies, argues that Ciri might be a partner, not a broodmare. Treat her as a queen in her own right, not a resource to be tapped. They remember, for a moment, what it was to be young apprentices themselves, at the mercy of older hands and colder plans. Yet the absence of one white-haired complication shifts their risk calculus. There is no Witcher guardian stalking the roads, no Geralt to appear out of the snow with sword in hand, and a stubborn refusal to yield. Without him, the girl is alone, untrained, and politically unclaimed. The Lodge can see the opportunity. No school of the wolf to tangle with, no sentimental bond to negotiate around, only frightened foster parents, half-competent bounty hunters, and Nilfgaardian agents who can be outplayed. So the tone hardens. What began as theoretical debate turns into logistics. Portals are mapped, safe houses prepared. A Redanian patrol is quietly reassigned to intercept a caravan that may or may not carry a thin, ashen-haired girl. It is presented on paper as a rescue mission, a way to shelter a dangerous asset from cruder hands. But in the private words, they do not write down. The plan is far clearer. This will not be Yennefer finding a lost child and, against her better judgment, loving her. There will be no slow mentorship, no shared nights by the fire arguing about destiny and freedom. Instead, the Lodge prepares a cold, calculated extraction, less invitation, more abduction, and as the first portal circles flare to life, the question is no longer whether they will find Ciri, it is what remains of the girl once they do. Ciri the Asset, life under the Lodge's control. The portal opens on stone and silence. Ciri comes through, half falling, half pushed, boots skidding on polished marble instead of forest loam or tavern straw. For a moment, she expects mud, rain, the stink of horses. Instead, there are vaulted ceilings, banners embroidered with constellations, and the cool, assessing eyes of women who have been planning this moment for years. They call it a rescue. They speak of safety, of protection from Nilfgaard, from hunters, from the nameless things that stalk elder blood. They do not mention the locks. She is disoriented, bruised, still tasting ash from the last village she fled through as the Empire's scouts closed in. A gentle hand steadies her. Perfume, silk, a voice trained to soothe and command in the same breath. The Lodge surrounds her in a circle of color and power, each sorceress a different court, a different faction, yet all united in the way they look at the girl, not as he once might have, as a child lost in war, but as an answer, a key, a weapon. Let's explore the depths of it. Training begins at once. No snow-slick yard, no wooden swords, no gruff witcher telling her to keep her guard up and mind her footwork. Instead, Dawn brings tutors in rhetoric and heraldry, afternoons of illusion and precise spellcraft, nights spent memorizing lineages until her eyes burn. She learns how to curtsy at exactly the right depth to a king she may later depose, how to smile with just enough warmth that a prince mistakes calculation for affection, how to still her face when pain flares under a binding sigil because emotion, they tell her, is a luxury rulers cannot afford. Where Kaer Morhen would have taught her to parry a blow, the Lodge teaches her to redirect a conversation. Where a witcher's code is blunt, monsters, contracts, payment, their ethics are written in exceptions and footnotes. This matter is not up for debate, child, one of them says when Ciri questions a planned assassination disguised as an accident. The realm must be guided. You will help us guide it. She is student and prisoner both. They flatter her, call her Lady of Time and Space, heiress of Lara Dorren, the last true hope against the White Frost. They threaten her too, with visions of what Nilfgaard would do if they had taken her instead. Doors do not slam, they simply never open unless a sorceress wills it. She can see the pattern soon enough. A compliment when she obeys, a cold rebuke when she resists. For a moment, she almost believes this is love, twisted, stern, but love all the same. The Lodge's long game is laid out in careful hints rather than open confession. A betrothal to a northern prince here, whispered over tea, a speculative remark about reviving Sintra's crown there, as he studies a map and traces trade routes with ink-stained fingers. They speak of thrones that should fall, Temeria weakened, Redania balanced, Nilfgaard contained not by battlefields, but by legitimacy. With Ciri's bloodline, they can unmake conquests, crown new rulers, and ensure those rulers remain forever indebted. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again, is the thought they project onto every absent king and emperor, justifying preemptive moves in the name of stability. Ciri listens, learning how they intend to sideline both Nilfgaard and the Witchers, to reduce swords and steel to relics, while magic and marriage contracts redraw borders. Yet, in a tower full of mirrors and secrets, reflections begin to slip. She catches two sorceresses arguing over whether her children will be raised in the north or at a Nilfgaardian court they plan to subvert from within. She overhears her own life discussed as breeding potential, as a line on a prophecy ledger, and she knows then that to them she is not a girl who survived Sintra, but an asset to be invested, spent, and replaced by heirs. The White Frost still looms in their calculations. Nilfgaard still marches. But as Ciri walks past yet another locked balcony, feeling the wards hum against her skin, a different fear takes root. What if the greatest danger to the continent is not the storm on the horizon, nor the black sun rising in the south, but the quiet, patient hands rearranging the board through her? She begins to test the wards, to listen at doors, to plan, because if she is a weapon, she will decide where she is aimed. The continent's new chessboard, 3 Ciri timelines. Compared, she begins to test the wards, but the continent is already testing her. Because in truth, there are 3 different Ciris now, 3 different answers to the same missing Witcher, and each one redraws the board in its own brutal way. In Nilfgaard, the girl who never runs to a swamp hovel or a witcher's arms grows into an empress in black and gold. As Emhyr's revealed daughter, she is paraded as the rightful heir of Cintra, the living law of surprise turned imperial decree. She learns early that maps are written in ink and blood, that treaties are only pauses between campaigns. She does not learn, for a moment, that saving one village matters as much as winning one war. In the gutters, the runaway Ciri is something else entirely. No court, no tutors, no careful hands on her shoulder. Just the rats, cheap wine, and the thrill of robbery as he knows it will end badly for someone every night. She rides through burning fields laughing, because it is laugh or remember the screams from Cintra. Power, to this Ciri, is the freedom to strike first, to never be the girl on the floor again, and behind those wards, the lodges Ciri studies. She begins to trace constellations of power on parchment and on people. To her, authority is a calculation. Who holds which secret? Who controls which bloodline? Which prophecy can be bent without breaking? She can see that she is the rarest resource in the room, and that everyone is pretending she is not. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again, becomes the silent refrain of every mage who thinks they can correct the failures of emperors and witchers both. Let's explore the depths of it. In Nilfgaard's path, Ciri's imperial duty accelerates conquest. With her claim to Cintra legitimized, border kingdoms fall faster. Resistance in the north fractures as some lords bend the knee to the rightful lion cub rather than the faceless black sun. In the rat's timeline, she is a ghost on the marches, a chaos event that burns supply lines, massacres patrols, and leaves both Nilfgaard and the north bleeding from 1,000 unclaimed wounds. In the lodge's design, she becomes a counterweight, a living deterrent the sorceresses can threaten to unleash or withhold, turning every royal council into a negotiation held under a drawn bow. Without Geralt's stubborn, small ethics, magic ceases to be background and becomes battlefield. Prophecies are no longer stories muttered in taverns, they are operational plans. The boy on the throne in Nilfgaard listens to astrologers and seers. The girl in the gutter tears holes in space when cornered. The asset in the tower walks between spheres on command. This matter is not up for debate. The more absent one Witcher is, the more present the elder blood must be. So the question hangs over all 3 boards. Of these Ciris, Empress, Feral Rider, Veiled Prodigy, which one truly stands a chance of facing the White Frost? Or does every road without Geralt, no matter how different it feels, still lead to the same frozen horizon, waiting just beyond the next open door? Geralt without Ciri, a Witcher, adrift. So if every road without Geralt seems to end in frost, what about the man who was supposed to walk beside her? What becomes of a Witcher whose destiny never quite arrives? Geralt's path, on the surface, barely shifts. He still rides from village to village, taking contracts on grave hags, leshens, and drowners, listening to peasants spit on his boots as he negotiates for coin. He begins most days the same way, sharpening blades, checking potions, calculating risk. There are still wars rumbling at the edges of the map, still kings whispering about Nilfgaard and Cintra, but for a moment they remain background noise to the rhythm of the path. Without Ciri, there is no central tether to pull him off it. No winter at Kaer Morhen spent teaching a girl basic sword forms. No frantic ride through half the continent because a child of surprise has gone missing. When he is dragged into local politics, it is transactional. A baron wants a monster dead. A sorcerer wants a relic retrieved. He does the job and leaves, trying not to care who uses the breathing space he bought with blood. Destiny, to him, stays a bad joke told in smoky taverns. The law of surprise is something he spits out through clenched teeth when a desperate farmer offers it, a reminder of a promise he once made in Cintra and never collected. He knows Calanthe lied. He can see, in retrospect, all the ways fate tried to cross his path with some royal child and failed. So the word destiny becomes a threat or a superstition, not a girl with ashen hair who forces him to admit he is capable of love. Let's explore the depths of it. A Geralt who never has to say, "my daughter," is a Geralt who never has to admit what he's been missing. Yennefer still burns through his life in cycles. Their meetings are just as intense, their partings just as bitter, but there is no small voice between them to soften the edges. no shared project of raising a child to balance Yen's hunger for power and Geralt's instinct to run. Their arguments over risk and sacrifice end with slammed doors, instead of exhausted compromises. Reconciliations are shorter, the nights are still passionate, but the mornings hold more silence. Without Ciri as a third point, their bond never quite stabilizes into a family. It remains a storm two people keep choosing and resenting. His reputation shifts accordingly. There are no songs about the White Wolf and the girl who opens portals with a scream. No rumors of a witcher guarding an elder blood princess. Instead, Geralt becomes an increasingly solitary legend, a necessary evil, feared on battlefields, respected in backrooms, but always slightly outside the great prophecies sorcerers trade in. This matter is not up for debate in the minds of kings and mages. He is a sword for hire, not a cornerstone of the world's fate. And yet, as he drinks in nameless inns, he still hears things. A story of a princess from Cintra who vanished in the chaos. Whispers of a girl who slips through space and time, of elven prophecies and white frost horizons. For a moment, he frowns, sensing a shape behind the words, something that brushes against that old, unwelcome word, destiny. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again, he tells himself, because there is nothing to be done about a rumor. So he finishes his ale, he rides on. Somewhere, an elder blood girl steps through a portal alone, never knowing the White Wolf was meant to be waiting on the other side. Ripple effects, Triss, Dandelion, and the missing bond. Triss Marigold hears about Cintra's fall the same as everyone else does. Reports on a war table, ink bleeding across maps, another red stain in a century of them. For a moment, it is only that. A tragedy, a strategic shift, a dozen new variables for the Lodge to argue over as he begins to weigh which king will listen, which will pay. In the canon we know, Ciri drags Triss out of that room and into something messier. Sleepless nights at Kaer Morhen, potions and fevers, the girl's small hand clutching at her robes as she explains the conjunction of the spheres in a voice that keeps shaking. Here, there is no hand, no child surprise to defend. Triss remains where she started, anchored to councils, conclaves, and the slow, poisonous gravity of mage politics. Without Ciri's frightened questions, she has fewer reasons to doubt the Lodge's breeding schemes or Philippa's quiet talk of elder blood. She still blushes around Geralt, still feels the tug of that old, foolish crush, but there is less to pull her away from the marble halls and more to keep her justifying compromises. She can see the danger of Nilfgaard, the danger of kings, yet with no girl to hide, her moral conflict dulls into habit. Let's explore the depths of it. A Triss who never has to watch a child vomit from a botched portal is a Triss who can keep telling herself that theory is safer than practice. Dandelion, by contrast, feels the absence without knowing its name. He wanders from court to court, loot on his back, still attached to the Witcher who keeps saving his skin. But his songs are different. No ballads of a white-haired killer stumbling into fatherhood. No tavern tales of a girl with a sword too big for her, laughing as she falls into the snow at Kaer Morhen's yard. Instead, he leans harder into satire, romance, courtly intrigue. He mocks kings, flatters duchesses, turns witchers into convenient monsters or tragic mercenaries, useful props in stories about human folly. The boy in the front row grows up hearing that witchers are sharp tools and sad men, not foster fathers. One less story about chosen family means one more about solitary blades, and Geralt himself, with no Ciri at his fire, he has fewer reasons to bargain with thrones. No child to smuggle out of a city, no stake in which banner flies over which keep. He takes contracts, kills what needs killing, and walks away. When kings summon him, he knows he can refuse. This matter is not up for debate, he tells them in his silence, because there is no little girl's safety to haggle over. The continent's myth-making shifts around that vacancy. No wolf and swallow cycle, no whispered refrain about family forged across species and fate. Bards reach for older patterns. Lone riders, doomed love, heroes who die without witnesses. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again, a listener might think. Yet the songs offer no example of someone who actually doesn't. Here is the pattern. Interrupt. The wars still burn. The empires still rise. But the most profound loss is quieter. It is the empathy that never travels from mouth to mouth because no one ever sings about a witcher, his sorceress, and the girl they chose to keep. Nilfgaard's Wars. Rewritten, victory by default? The wars do not pause to mourn that missing song. Nilfgaard still marches. Banners still burn over Sintra's broken walls, but as we move through these diverging paths, the absence of a Witcher and his girl shifts the weight of every victory and every loss. Does the Empire win by default, or does it simply learn new ways to bleed? In the Empress branch, the answer seems simple at first. Ciri's blood gives Emir something he has always craved but never truly possessed, an uncontested story. The lion cub of Cintra, rightful heir of Calanthe, is now seated in the south, draped in black and gold. He can see the advantage immediately. When Nilfgaard moves north, it is no longer merely conquest. It is restoration. Provinces are not annexed, they are returned to their sovereign. Let's explore the depths of it. A marriage to a Redanian prince, a Kaedweni duke, even a carefully chosen Nordling puppet would turn future invasions into legal formalities, muting resistance among nobles who care more about precedent than pride. Still, the field is never that clean. In a rat's timeline, Ciri never wears a crown. She wears road dust and stolen armor. The girl tears through borderlands with her gang, hitting caravans, tax trains, and occasionally Nilfgaardian patrols. For a moment, the Empire underestimates her, treating these raids as common banditry, but the pattern grows stranger. Supply lines to the front fray. A key courier disappears before delivering orders to a northern collaborator. A Cintran partisan cell survives an ambush because the rats accidentally smashed the wrong column the week before. She weakens the North's coordination by turning half the marches into terrified, leaderless chaos. Yet she also cuts deep, irritating wounds into Nilfgaard's logistics. In the Lodge branch, the game becomes colder. Philippa and the others know what Elder Blood means. They know this girl could close portals, shatter armies, even flee the White Frost itself. But they move as they always do, carefully, secretly, too slowly. Ciri is trained, hidden, argued over. This matter is not up for debate, they say in their councils, yet they debate it all the same. By the time the Lodge dares to unleash her as a counter-imperial asset, teleporting strike teams, sabotaging key offensives, Nilfgaard has already carved deep into the map. She blunts advances, she does not reverse them. Threaded through all of this is the quiet absence of Geralt. No Witcher at Sodden's fringes, nudging survivors toward the right allies. No lone swordsman in a village, killing the wrong Nilfgaardian officer at exactly the right time. In canon, his small sabotages and rescues keep certain kings breathing, certain atrocities from hardening into permanent terror. Remove those, and the scales tip, not dramatically at first, but relentlessly. So across these branches, Nilfgaard either wins faster under an empress, or strangles the north longer against a scattered resistance and a late-awakened lodge. The continent still burns. The question is whether, without the White Wolf and his cub, any version of it is truly spared from something worse, and that answer waits in what Ciri does when no one is there to pull her back. The north's countermoves, kings, Skellige, and desperation. So as Ciri moves without a Witcher's shadow beside her, the North is left staring at Nilfgaard's new symbol and realizing there is no miracle coming. No White Wolf, no Child of Destiny riding with a monster slayer, just banners, black and gold, and a girl they either lost or never truly had. Foltest feels it first in Temeria, reading report after report of southern victories. He begins to lean harder on what he understands: coin, contracts, and the old web of oaths. Mercenary companies grow fat on his gold as he hires Redanian crossbowmen, Mahakam veterans, freelances who care nothing for prophecy. He can see that talk of elder blood no longer rallies the taverns. People want grain, pay, and someone to hold the ford. So he calls on Demavend, on Henselt, speaking of borders and tariffs rather than destiny, and the alliances that form are practical, brittle, and utterly human. In Eidern, Demavend watches the same storm gather and comes to the same cold conclusion. There will be no lion cub to parade through Vengerberg's streets as a promise of tomorrow. For a moment, he toys with Bard's tales of a hidden heir, of a girl smuggled north. Then he signs another charter for dwarven sappers, and sends riders to Codwin instead. Let sorcerers whisper about elder blood. His scouts will measure Nilfgaard's strength in miles and wagons. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again. Another Cintra falling, while kings waited on omens. Out west, the sea answers differently. Skellige remembers Calanthe not as a queen on parchment, but as the woman who drank, laughed, and swore oaths with their jarls. When word spreads that Ciri has been taken south, whether as promised empress or chained captive, the Isles take it as a wound to their own honor. Raiders volunteer without being asked. Longships slip from Ard Skellig under cover of fog, not for plunder alone, but for the mad hope of snatching the girl back from an imperial convoy or coastal villa. They fail, sometimes brutally. A Nilfgaardian frigate burns 3 Drakars to the waterline off Nazaire. Another time, a Skellige captain actually reaches a carriage rumored to bear the Empress-to-be, only to find a decoy and a company of magi waiting. The message is clear. The Empire expected this. The boy on the Skellige throne clenches his fist as he hears the tally of dead, yet still he orders more symbolic strikes. Let the continent see that not everyone bows. In the shadows behind these thrones, temptation grows teeth. If Nilfgaard holds Ciri, if their mages study Elder Blood at leisure, then what can answer that but something equally unnatural? In the Lodge timeline, Philippa and the others scour ancient vaults for artifacts buried since the Conjunction. In the harsher branches, lesser courts do the same, bargaining with cursed blades, unstable portals, relics that warp time for a moment and shatter 3 towns when they fail. This matter is not up for debate, they tell themselves, as they unseal another forbidden grimoire. Either they gamble with the fabric of magic, or they watch the map turn black. Let's explore the depths of it. In a world where no Witcher walks beside the Child of Destiny, the North begins to twist into something else, less chivalry. More assassins, hedge witches, and private armies. As he studies his crumbling borders, each king knows he is choosing between slow defeat and darker tools, and in that choice, the North may survive, but as something harsher and stranger than it has ever been before. Ciri's inner war, identity without a chosen family. And at the center of those harsher, stranger Norths stands Ciri herself, pulled in different directions by titles, gangs, and prophecies, with no gravel-voiced Witcher to tell her who she is not. Let's explore the depths of it, because without that chosen family, every version of the girl begins from the same wound. She is powerful, but she is not anchored. In the Empress path, the anchors are forged of gold. Ciri sits on marble steps, in Nilfgaardian black and silver, yet for a moment, she smells horse sweat and sea salt, hears the gulls of Sintra's cliffs. The memories are blurred, half-remembered scraps of Calanthe's laughter, and the weight of a wooden practice sword. Emir surrounds her with tutors, heralds, a carefully curated history in which she is both rightful heir and dutiful daughter. Still, he can see there is a distance in her gaze when she signs decrees. She knows these words bind entire provinces, but they do not explain the ghost of a grandmother who died on a burning wall, or why the thought of Skellige mead makes her throat tighten. This matter is not up for debate, he tells his court. She is empress. Yet the girl beneath the crown keeps asking who Ciri of Cintra was, and why no one will answer plainly. On the rat's path, there is no crown, only dust, blood, and stolen coin. Ciri rides with Missile and the others, and the boys she guts behind a barn will haunt her more than any battlefield. She laughs with the gang, drinks, throws herself into each raid, as he might into a duel, trying to drown the image of burning Cintra and the sound of Nilfgaardian trumpets. Loyalty becomes her armor. If she is Falka, if she is their avenger, then perhaps the guilt for every dead merchant and terrified farmer can be buried. But there is no Geralt to pull her aside after the first killing, no Yennefer to kneel and say the terror in her eyes is not weakness, so she hardens. She begins to believe that the only safe way to love is through shared crimes, not shared healing. In the Lodge path, the walls are velvet, the chains invisible. Philippa, Margarita, the others smile as they watch her train. Ciri learns to modulate her voice, to bow just so, to open portals with a precision that terrifies even veteran sorceresses. She presents the perfect student, and for a moment they are almost convinced, but she has learned that every kindness here carries an invoice. Every lesson is a down payment on a future where her womb and her elder blood are state assets. So she carves herself into compartments. The obedient apprentice in the salon, the frightened child alone in her chamber, the weapon in the testing hall. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again, is the thought Geralt would have had, seeing this. In this world, he is not there to say it. Canon offers a cruel comparison. At Kaer Morhen, Ciri is told to fall, fail, and get up again, not because she is a prophecy, but because she is family. Geralt's gruff insistence that she is not a tool, Yennefer's furious demand that she choose her own fate, these are the rails that keep her from flying entirely off the track. When she stands before the White Frost, she does so as someone who has been loved in all her brokenness, not merely polished for a role. Strip that away, and each AU Ciri is sharper, more brittle. Empress Ciri may choose ruthless conquest to silence the child who remembers fire. Rat Ciri may burn the world first, so it cannot hurt her again. Lodge Ciri may open the wrong door in space and time simply to prove she is more than their breeding stock. And when the fate of worlds finally demands a decision, a Ciri who has never been held as just a girl is far more likely to answer as a weapon, a throne, or a prophecy, rather than as herself. Pattern: interrupt, a world where Ciri dies early. But there is a colder possibility, one Geralt never lets himself dwell on for a moment. Not a harder Ciri, not a crueler Ciri, a world where the girl simply never lives long enough to become anything at all. Cintra still burns, Calanthe still throws her soldiers and her pride against Nilfgaard's tide. But this time, the escape goes wrong in some small, stupid way. A cart breaks an axle on the road north, a Skelligan ship takes one ballista bolt too many, or a Nilfgaardian patrol, drunk on victory, decides to chase one more fleeing wagon through the night. There is no Witcher on the road, no white-haired rider to pull the child from the wreckage as hooves thunder past. The men who find the bodies do not know they are stepping over elder blood. They bury what they can and ride on, cursing the war, and with that, the continent's most dangerous secret dies in a ditch outside a conquered kingdom. Politically, the shock is immediate and brutal. Cintra's claim to itself dies with Ciri. There is no living heir for Skellige to rally around, no lion cub for northern bards to weave into a banner. Nilfgaard loses its perfect puppet queen, its story of merciful liberation, under an emir who brings home his lost daughter. The emperor still conquers, still marches, but he can see how much harder it is to sell his war as destiny when the symbol he needs is rotting in the ground. In Aretuza's hidden chambers, the lodge's plans simply collapse. No breeding program, no carefully arranged marriages, no child of destiny to mold into a compliant empress. Philippa and the others scramble for substitutes, tracing distant elder blood cousins whose power is weaker, more diffuse, easier to hide, and harder to use. They know the line has not vanished, only scattered, and that makes it more frightening, because the magic does not care that Ciri is dead. The white frost does not pause out of respect for a child's grave. The elven prophecies lose their central name, but not their warning. Seers wake in the night with visions of frozen worlds, and doors between spheres that no longer have a single key, but 1,000 tiny cracks. Elder blood runs through peasants and petty nobles now, unnoticed, untrained, each one a potential misstep in space and time. And without a clear child of destiny, human behavior shifts. Rulers turn their eyes from prophecy back to grain tithes, fortifications, and marriage contracts. Mages spend more time on courts and conclaves than on ancient verses. The world becomes, in some ways, less mythic. Fewer whispers of a girl who can walk between worlds, more talk of tariffs and troop movements. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again becomes the unspoken oath of every king who thinks only of the next war, not the next winter. Here is the pattern interrupt. What if the scariest version of this story is not a different Ciri at all? Let's explore the depths of it. A continent that must face the white frost with no Ciri, no focal point, no chosen one, only scattered bloodlines, frightened mages, and a sky that grows a little paler each year. This matter is not up for debate. The storm is still coming. The question is who, if anyone, will answer it. The white frost's endgame in each timeline. The storm is still coming, and in each timeline, it finds a different Ciri waiting at the edge of the void. The white frost is not impressed by crowns, gangs, or councils. It only cares what the child of the elder blood decides to do when the sky turns white and the air begins to burn. In the Empress Path, she wears gold when that moment comes. Raised in the marble corridors of Nilfgaard, she knows the weight of grain tallies, legion rosters, and starving provinces. She has read elven prophecies in secret, then read the Empire's censored versions aloud at court. So when mages whisper that she can divert the frost by stepping through, by letting it take her instead of the world, Ciri does not hear a legend. She hears a negotiation. Sacrifice her life, sacrifice her comfort, or sacrifice the continent. The Emperor's scribes are already sharpening their quills. If she dies, it becomes a holy imperial myth, the black sun redeemed by a black banner, the empress who walked into the storm for her people. If she lives but vanishes into another sphere, Nilfgaard still claims the story, framing her departure as a chosen exile for the good of mankind. Either way, the Empire turns her choice into policy. The rat's path offers no such dignity. Here, the girl who should have been a queen rides with cutthroats, her elder blood awakening in alleys and burning fields. She has seen witch hunters, kings, and mages hunt her as a resource, not a person. So when the frost finally presses against the fabric of her world and a gate opens, she remembers every collar they tried to fasten around her neck. Why save a world that only ever tried to own her? For a moment, she considers stepping in, ending it on her terms. Then she laughs, bitter and tired, and turns away. Let it all freeze. Let the palaces and towers learn how it feels to be powerless. She becomes, by refusal, the quiet architect of extinction. In the Lodge Path, the choice is dressed in ceremony. Philippa and the others have spent years preparing for this, drafting rituals and contingencies, as he begins to see Ciri not as a girl, but as a keystone. They do not plan for a clean martyrdom, they plan for management, redirect the frost into another sphere, contain it, survive it, perhaps even harness it. They script her confrontation with prophecies, sigils, and escape routes for themselves. Still, he can see the flaw. The frost will not follow their minutes or respect their hierarchy. One miscalculation, one surge of panic from a girl who was never taught to be human before she was made into a weapon, and the spell turns from shield to scythe. Across all these paths, mentorship is the missing anchor. Without Geralt's stubborn, grounding love, or Yennefer's fierce insistence that she is more than prophecy, the stakes become abstract, transactional. Worlds, empires, bloodlines, numbers on a cosmic ledger instead of faces at a campfire. This matter is not up for debate, the Frost seems to say. It will come. The question is simpler and far more terrifying. In which of these worlds does Ciri choose to be a savior? And in which does she decide that if everything must end, it will end on her terms? Geralt's final days, a legend without legacy. And in the shadow of that question, the camera pulls away from Ciri and the Frost and settles on someone far smaller in the grand design, an aging witcher on a muddy road, walking because he has nowhere else to go. Geralt is older now, slower. The famous white hair is thinner, the scars heavier, his movements still precise but measured in a way that hints he knows every misstep might be his last. He still takes contracts, a Leshen in Velen, a pack of Neckers outside Novigrad, a wraith in some forgotten barrow. He begins each hunt as he always has, oils, potions, steel and silver laid out with ritual care. But the work has changed. The gold barely stretches. The villagers are quicker to haggle, quicker to spit. The path, once a harsh sort of freedom, narrows into repetition, a loop he can see and yet cannot step outside of. What else is he supposed to be, if not this? His world thins around him. Vesemir dies at Kaer Morhen, not in some desperate stand to protect a girl, but in bed after a winter that was simply too long. Lambert drifts off on his own contracts and stops coming back for the equinox. Eskel vanishes in the chaos of Nilfgaard's wars, another missing name in a ledger of the dead. Triss writes less. Yennefer still appears, storms, and disappears again, chasing lodge intrigues and imperial politics, but there is no child between them to force a shared purpose, no exhausted nights at a campfire where they argue over how to raise the girl. For a moment, Geralt considers staying with Yen in some Marble City apartment, listening to her plan the future of magic, but there is no anchor, no small voice to interrupt their quarrels, no reason for him to trade the road for politics. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again, he tells himself, remembering every time he tried to settle and watched it rot, so he leaves. The door closes. The lodge continues without him. Rumors of elder blood and the White Frost reach him as tavern gossip and half-drunk prophecy. A Nilfgaardian officer boasts that their emperor seeks a living weapon. A Skelliger skald sings of a girl who can walk between worlds. Geralt listens, frowns, and orders another drink. World-ending threats sound distant, abstract, when no terrified child has ever clutched your hand and asked if the sky will fall. He can see the pattern, but without Ciri's face attached to it, it becomes just another story of kings and mages ruining everything. His death, when it comes, is almost insultingly small. Perhaps it's a botched contract in a swamp, where one misjudged step in the mud lets a drowner's claw slip past his guard. Perhaps it's a fever in a roadside inn, his potions no longer enough to bully his body into healing. He fights, of course. He dies as he lived, stubborn, professional, unyielding, but there is no converging army, no spectral riders, no child of destiny screaming his name. In the years that follow, the White Wolf becomes a story, told in 3 villages and a city quarter. Some remember the way he lifted a curse from a baron's daughter. Others swear he once slew a dragon in the mountains. The details blur. No one mentions that he might have walked beside destiny itself, because in this world, he never did. And the continent is poorer for it, even if most will never know what they lost. Only that when the frost finally comes, there is no gruff, weary witcher standing beside the girl who must choose what burns and what survives. Humanity versus prophecy, what Geralt meant to Ciri's choice. In the canon story, what Geralt offers Ciri is not another spell, sword, or banner to rally beneath. He offers her something far rarer on the continent, the right to be small, frightened, and ordinary for a moment, even while the world insists she is anything but. Let's explore the depths of it, because that difference reshapes how she faces both prophecy and power. From the start, Geralt treats destiny the way he treats most things, with a tired squint and a refusal to be impressed. The law of surprise binds them twice, bards whisper of elder blood and white frost, yet when the girl shivers in Kaer Morhen's courtyard, he can see only a child who needs boots that fit and a wooden sword cut down to her height. He begins by insisting she eat, sleep, train, complain. He refuses to call her savior or weapon, and precisely because he strips away the mystique, Ciri learns to breathe inside the cage of prophecy instead of letting it close around her throat. That is the paradox. By refusing to worship her fate, Geralt makes it bearable. When she stumbles in the snow, he grunts, tells her to get up, and corrects her footing rather than invoking Ithlin. When her powers flare, he runs toward her, not away, grounding her terror in the simple fact that someone is willing to stand there and be burned if that's what it takes. This matter is not up for debate in his mind. She is a person first, everything else second. In the AU, that anchor never forms. Emir looks at Ciri and sees an empire soldered together with a marriage bed. The lodge sees a breeding program, elder blood distilled and managed across generations. The rats, if she ever finds them, see a banner and a legend, the girl who will make their robberies into stories. Each faction encourages her to internalize a role. Dutiful heir, arcane asset, feral symbol of rebellion. No one tells her she can simply be Ciri, who hates cabbage soup and bad jokes. Without Geralt, love is always bartered, conditional, or strategic. Calanthe loves her, but through the lens of Cintra's survival. Emir's affection is tangled with conquest. The lodge offers mentorship with a ledger under the table. There is no one who loves her without agenda, no gruff witcher who will cross kingdoms just to find the girl, not the prophecy, and so she never gains that stable point from which to negotiate with fate on her own terms. Canon Ciri can choose. When she steps toward the white frost, when she risks herself to close the door on a frozen apocalypse, it is not the endpoint of pure manipulation or simmering resentment. It is the decision of someone who has been allowed to say no, and thus finds a way to say yes that feels like ownership rather than surrender. In the AU, every path toward sacrifice is already scripted by someone else's hand. Remove Geralt, and you don't just alter her training or her scars, you darken the lens through which she judges whether the world deserves saving at all. If no one ever looked at her and saw just a girl worth finding, why should the Lady of Time and Space believe the continent is worth the cost of her choosing? Pattern interrupt, a brief return to canon for contrast. So for a moment, step back, not into this colder, twisted branch we've been tracing, but into the path we already know. Ciri at Kaer Morhen, snow in her hair, wooden sword in her hands, the courtyard echoing with Vesemir's barked corrections and Lambert's muttered curses. She stumbles through a sequence, feet wrong, blade wrong, breath ragged. Geralt watches, arms folded, saying nothing at first. Then he moves, corrects her stance with 2 fingers on her shoulder, and a quiet, again. It's brutal work, bruises on top of bruises, but the boy from Blaviken who became a witcher knows exactly why he won't go easier on her. Now set that beside the AU, no keep, no wolves on the walls, no witcher medallion against her throat. Instead, an imperial hall in Nilfgaard, or a Kintran training yard under Calanthe's gaze. The lessons are still harsh, but the purpose has shifted. In canon, she is taught to survive. Here, she is taught to serve. Dynasty, prophecy, or someone else's war. The strikes land the same. The meaning behind them does not. Think of their arguments. In the books and the games, Ciri shouts at Geralt, accusing him of treating her like a child, of hiding truths, of trying to choose her path. He snaps back, tired and frightened, that this matter is not up for debate when it comes to her safety. The words are sharp, yet under them lies a stubborn, desperate love. He can see what the world does to children, who are only weapons or pawns, and he refuses to let that be her. In the AU, those same confrontations play out with different faces. A lodge sorceress in a tower, explaining breeding programs in a tone so calm it feels inhuman. An emperor outlining campaigns on a map as he begins to speak of her womb and her bloodline as assets. There are arguments, yes, but they're negotiations over property, not the flaring, painful clashes of two people trying to protect each other from themselves. Canon gives us the rats too, but there, her time with them is framed by what came before and what comes after. She has Kaer Morhen in her bones, Yennefer's perfume in her memory, Geralt's gruff voice in her ear. When she rides with the gang, cutting down merchants and soldiers, we feel the horror precisely because we've seen her fall asleep against Yennefer's shoulder, both of them pretending not to need the comfort. Contrast that with the AU version of those same raids. No prior winter nights by the fire at Kaer Morhen, no quiet Gwent games, no lesson where Yennefer guides her hand through a simple spell, and then, just for a moment, lets it turn into a hug. The slaughter on the road becomes the baseline, not the deviation. The world grows colder, more transactional. Warmth isn't lost, it was never there. Let's explore the depths of it. Canon is still vicious, pogroms, massacres, the white frost looming, but it keeps insisting on small, stubborn mercies. A witcher buying a girl a wooden horse, a sorceress brushing her ward's hair, a grizzled old Vesemir saving the best stew for the child. In the AU, those gestures thin out. What remains is efficiency, ideology, and survival, and once you feel that contrast in your gut, the original story shifts tone. The law of surprise, the meetings in the forest, the reunion in the swamp, do they still read as inevitable destiny, or as a chain of fragile, lucky miracles that could have snapped at any point? Because if we've just walked through all the branches where they never find each other, how certain are we that fate had anything to do with it at all? Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again. The Witcher's fate, extinction or reinvention. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again. In another corner of the continent, far from broken oaths and missed meetings, the Witchers of Kaer Morhen stand on their walls and watch the snow fall, and they can see what the world refuses to admit. Their kind is dying. There are fewer of them each winter. No new boys on the trail, no fresh screams in the laboratory, no mutagens brewing in the cold alchemical light. The villages still whisper that witchers steal children and drink blood, yet those same villagers haggle over every crown when a ghoul nest is cleared. As he sharpens his sword, an old wolf knows the numbers do not lie. When one of them falls, no one replaces him. In canon, Ciri's arrival cuts across this slow extinction like a comet, a princess in a keep of outcasts, a child of surprise, laughing in the ruined halls. She trains with them, bleeds with them, but she is also something else, a bridge. Through her, Kaer Morhen is no longer only a cursed fortress of mutants. It becomes the hidden refuge of a lost heir, a place where destiny and politics quietly intersect. Let's explore the depths of it for a moment, because when a girl with elder blood calls these killers her family, it softens edges that steel and signs never could. Triss comes, Yennefer follows, and suddenly mages, monarchs, and monsters are all forced to reckon with the idea that witchers can protect more than coin purses. They can guard futures. They can raise a child. In that version of events, doors that were sealed for centuries begin to open, even if only a crack. Strip Ciri from that picture, and the cracks freeze shut. In this AU, when Nilfgaard burns Sintra and the North looks for someone to blame, the Witchers make an easy target. No one asks how a handful of mutants could have stopped Emir's legions. They only remember the old tales that Witchers were made to stand between men and monsters. The boy who never came to Kaer Morhen becomes one more accusation. If these killers are so mighty, why did they not save the lion cub of Sintra? Armies and mages dominate the stage. Sorcerers form lodges, emperors redraw borders, and the Witchers Witchers become background noise, useful in the dark, embarrassing in daylight. Contracts dwindle. Some schools vanish entirely, their keeps collapsing into the mountains as if the land itself is tired of remembering them. Yet extinction is not the only path. He begins to see another, harsher compromise. A few Witchers might abandon the old isolation, trading the path for permanent service. Bodyguards to merchants in Novigrad, royal monster consultants in Redania, silent enforcers for crime lords who value steel and discretion, not heroes, not legends, tools that have learned to negotiate their own use. This matter is not up for debate, one of them might tell a wary duke. You want your line to survive the night? You hire the mutant. Slowly, suspicion gives way to grudging reliance. A different bridge, built not on prophecy, but on contracts and necessity. But in a world where no child ever runs laughing through Kaer Morhen's courtyard, one question lingers over the last, dimly lit laboratory. Do Witchers fade quietly into legend? Or does some desperate final experiment try to forge a new Ciri in steel and alchemy, no matter the cost? The Lodge triumphant, or damned, Ciri in steel and alchemy, no matter the cost? Because while the Witchers turn inward, the Lodge looks outward. They can see the gaps opening on the board, Nilfgaard pressing north, kings dying too quickly, prophecies whispering of elder blood with no Witcher in sight to claim it. For a moment, Philippa Eilhart feels something close to triumph. The game has never been clearer. In the best version of this timeline, they win. Ciri is found early, not as a half-starved fugitive, but as a guarded asset. She is educated in Aretuza's marble halls, wrapped in silk and spell wards, told that duty is love and that the Lodge is family. A compliant husband is chosen for her, a northern prince whose crown depends on their favor. Through that marriage, a dynasty is forged, elder blood on the throne, sorceresses in every council chamber, Nilfgaard held at bay by timely alliances, sabotaged campaigns, and assassinations that never reach the history books. On the surface, it works. Armies move where the Lodge points, trade flows where they open ports. When the Emperor tests the north, he finds his generals confounded by fog that never lifts, roads that collapse under wagons, and rebellions that blossom at exactly the wrong moment. To a casual chronicler, this looks like an age of clever queens and unusually fortunate kings. But inside the Lodge's own circle, rot sets in. Ciri is too valuable, too dangerous, for their unity to survive. Who owns her? Philippa, who orchestrated her capture. Francesca, who claims ancient elven rights over elder blood. Triss, who still remembers the girl's laughter and flinches when the others say asset instead of child. Each ritual, each experiment becomes an argument. How far can they push her gift before it pushes back? They tell themselves they will keep her safe. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again, becomes their unspoken creed. No more Thaned, no more chaos they do not control, so they draw more of her power, test more portals, stretch her across more worlds. Ciri begins to understand she is less a queen than a key. Outside, the mask slips. Northern rulers bristle, as he knows, in his bones, that his crown rests on a girl he never truly commands, and a cabal he never truly sees. Priests whisper of unnatural women steering fate. Commoners notice that when famine is averted, it is always after a sorceress visits the granaries, and when a war begins, it is always after one leaves the king's tent. Resentment curdles into fear. One failed harvest, one botched spell, one rumor that Ciri walked through fire untouched. That is all it takes for torches to be lit in temple squares, for preachers to call for purges. Witch hunts do not start from reason, they start from stories, and the Lodge has given the continent too many, and over all of this, the white frost looms. To Geralt, in another life, it was a storm to be outrun or faced. To the Lodge, it is a negotiating partner. If Ciri can open doors, can she not also choose which world freezes and which survives? Let's explore the depths of it. They begin to think in terms of leverage. Perhaps a rival kingdom can be encouraged with a demonstration. Perhaps a controlled incursion of frost, just enough to frighten, will secure obedience. This matter is not up for debate, someone finally says, as they circle maps dotted with potential sacrifice zones. Ciri stands at the center of the room, hearing them discuss which lands might be abandoned to eternal winter, as if they were moving pieces of carved ivory, and trying to bind destiny tighter, removing the unpredictable Witcher, replacing him with councils and ledgers. The Lodge builds a future that is paradoxically more fragile. one girl, one bloodline, one secret war against the sky. All it takes is one fracture, Ciri's rebellion, a king's betrayal, a spell gone wrong. Then the carefully managed balance shatters, and the continent learns that a world held together by invisible hands can explode far more violently than one left to chance. Nilfgaard's golden age, or Pyrrhic victory, so the lodge's invisible threads snap, and the continent staggers. Into that vacuum, Nilfgaard does what Nilfgaard always does, marches. Yet this time, its spearhead is not just black banners and disciplined legions, but a single girl on a marble throne, Empress Cirilla Fiona Ellen Rhiannon. For a moment, it looks like history has finally chosen a winner. Decades pass under her sigil. Roads are paved from the Yaruga crossings to the Kestrel Mountains, straight, well-drained, patrolled by Imperial riders who keep bandits and drowners at bay with equal efficiency. Tax codes are standardized. A merchant in Novigrad pays under the same ledger as a vintner in Toussaint. Grain flows south in harsh winters, coin flows north in poor harvests, and the old chaos of tariffs and petty tolls is hammered into something resembling order. On paper, it is a golden age. Even Radovid's former subjects can see that fewer children starve by the roadside, but order in Nilfgaard is never neutral. Each new courthouse brings imperial law, not local custom. Temples are rebuilt, yes, yet priests now preach loyalty to the sun alongside their gods, watched by quiet men in black who file reports instead of confessions. Skellige's Jarls are summoned to swear fealty under threat of embargo. The Pontar Valley's free towns wake up to find their charters revised in the name of unity. Let's explore the depths of it. Stability comes dressed in black silk, and beneath the silk there is chainmail. Rebellions do not vanish, they learn to whisper. A burned banner here, a murdered tax collector there, a smuggled pamphlet that calls her Calanthe's ghost in foreign armor. As she reads those words, Ciri can feel the old Cintran hurt twist in her chest. She knows what was done to her homeland. She knows this empire helped orchestrate her stolen childhood. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again becomes her own mirror. Still, she is hardly going to sit by and allow more Cintras to burn. So the Empress stands in council chambers that smell of ink and hot wax, listening to generals argue for harsher pacifications, while advisors from the lodge, those who survived their own games, urge careful reform. She begins by granting limited self-rule in the north, pardoning certain rebels, easing the worst cultural bans. Yet each concession risks emboldening dissent, and each crackdown risks confirming every nightmare told about Nilfgaard. This matter is not up for debate, one marshal insists, demanding mass executions in Vengerberg. Ciri's knuckles whiten on the arm of her throne as she weighs mercy against fear. Over all of this hangs a colder threat. The White Frost does not care for paved roads or neat borders. An efficient empire cannot negotiate with entropy when mages bring her fragmented prophecies, when elven seers whisper that only her elder blood can open a path away from the coming freeze. The imperial map on her wall suddenly looks small. One choice: pour the Empire's strength into vast, desperate preparations, or abandon it and step alone into the spaces between worlds. If she stays, she may rule a continent that freezes in orderly ranks. If she goes, she may doom everything she has built, yet save something larger that no banner can claim. As he traces the old prophecies, an aged advisor can see the truth. In this timeline, the question is no longer whether Nilfgaard wins. It is whether Ciri can live with the world that victory creates, or whether, one night, the Empress of Nilfgaard turns her power not on the Frost, but on the empire that forged her crown. And if she does, the first palace wall she brings down will not be the last. The Rat's Legacy, a broken world of small fires. So what happens to a world where the Empress of Nilfgaard never learns to stop pulling the trigger? In this timeline, the answer does not arrive as a treaty or a prophecy fulfilled, but as stories whispered in taverns and in trenches about a writer who should not exist. They call her many things: the Ghost of Sodden, the Ashen Falcon. In one burned-out village on the Yaruga, men swear a girl rode through the smoke, her horse barely touching the ground, and for a moment the wounded rose with their guts whole, their lungs clear, only to vanish screaming into a slit of emerald light. Months later, on the Pontar front, a Nilfgaardian quartermaster reports that entire supply caravans simply never arrive. Scouts trace the tracks into a meadow that ends in a blackened circle of glass. No bodies, no wagons, just the stink of ozone and the memory of hooves. He begins to understand, as he listens to these tales, that no banner truly wins under such a sky. Nilfgaard's famed discipline phrase, when commanders see their aides yanked sideways through invisible doors. Northern lords, already half broken by defeat, watch their last veteran captain step into one tent and step out into nowhere. Supply lines, once the quiet arteries of war, become haunted roads, where a single glimpse of a pale girl is enough to make hardened soldiers drop their spears and run. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again. A Nilfgaardian general orders priests to bless every wagon, mages to ward every bridge. Northern kings do the same, in reverse. The result is not control, but contagion. Superstition hardens into policy. Armies refuse to march on certain nights. Harvests rot in the field, because peasants will not cross the old stone ford, where they say the world once folded in on itself, and at the center of it, Ciri rides. She begins as the rat's legend made flesh, a thrill-seeking outlaw with an empire's resources behind her, and no one left who can tell her no. Each portal is an escape, each raid a way to outrun the memory of Sintra, of Skellige, of every pair of dead eyes she left in the dust. But the farther she runs, the stranger the pattern becomes. A village spared here, a regiment annihilated there, and the line between mercy and cruelty blurs every time her power slips. There comes a night when she steps through a gate meant to carry her and a handful of loyal guards across the river. The spell catches on something, a ley line, a shard of elder magic, the raw wound of some earlier mistake, and tears. An entire city vanishes. Walls, towers, markets, children in their beds. In its place, a crater rhymed with hoarfrost, the air screaming with distant echoes of worlds that were never meant to touch. For a moment, the girl who was once only a pawn of thrones cannot breathe. This matter is not up for debate, she tells herself, staring at the frozen ruin. Either she learns to master what she is, or the continent dies by inches every time she tries to flee. No kindly witcher waits at a keep in the mountains. No sorceress stands ready to guide her hand. There is only a trail of small fires, sudden rifts, and the growing certainty that the white frost is no longer the worst thing on the horizon. Let's explore the depths of it. In a world already cracking under her touch, Ciri may finally choose to face the frost, not out of love, not out of duty, but out of sheer horror at what she has already done, and what she knows she will do again if she keeps running. Yennefer's last gambit, choosing a side without Ciri. That horror doesn't just echo in empty worlds. It finds an answer in one person who has been watching the cracks form from the very beginning, Yennefer of Vengerberg. In every branch of this broken timeline, she feels the disturbance long before she can name it, portals that misfire. Students at Aretuza waking screaming, swearing they stood in snow beneath a green sky. She can see the pattern. Elder blood, unmoored, moving through space and time without a tether. And still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again, is how someone like Vilgefortz might think. Yennefer's reaction is colder, more private. She simply decides, this matter is not up for debate. She will find the source. In the Empress path, that decision drags her straight toward Nilfgaard. Ciri on the Sun Throne, not as a ward or a wayward girl, but as the beating heart of an empire that has finally won. Here, Yennefer has 3 roads, and none of them are clean. She can accept the role Emhyr offers, Imperial Advisor, Court Mage, the woman who whispers in the Empress's ear while the North is bound in golden chains. She can embed herself in the Lodge as their Nilfgaardian liaison, pretending loyalty as he begins to sense that every conversation is another chance to steer them away from breeding programs and quiet assassinations. Or she can vanish into the spaces between courts, a rogue agent slipping through forbidden portals, forever testing the magical cordon around the Imperial Palace, trying to reach a girl who does not know her name. Let's explore the depths of it for a moment. When she finally stands before Empress Cirilla in this world, there is no reunion, no remembered scent of lilac and gooseberries. There is only a wary ruler and a stranger with violet eyes. Yennefer speaks to a monarch, not a daughter. Advice becomes negotiation. Affection, when it appears at all, is political capital. Does Ciri listen because she feels something she can't explain, or because this sorceress is too dangerous to ignore? On the rat's path, the chase is uglier. Yennefer tracks rumors of a girl who leaves splintered timelines in her wake, who rides with gutter thieves and laughs as cities burn. When they finally meet, it's in some half-collapsed village, where time stutters around them, snow falling in midsummer. Ciri sees a controlling mage, another would-be handler. Yennefer sees raw power in a body that has never been taught how to stop. Their clash is not mother and child arguing, it is two predators circling, each testing how far the other will go. Any tenderness has to be earned in the middle of that, and in the lodge path, the fight moves indoors. Without a bond to Ciri, Yennefer's place in the Cabal is stronger at first. No one questions her judgment, no one fears she will choose the girl over the plan, but as he listens to Philippa and the others discuss bloodlines, breeding, and surgical control of the elder blood, he begins to feel that old, buried fury. He knows what it means to be treated as a resource, not a person. The first time they suggest binding Ciri with Gyasa and wards, something in Yennefer snaps. Civil war among sorceresses doesn't begin with fireballs. It begins with one woman refusing to nod along. She blocks a vote. She sabotages a ritual. She leaks a secret to a northern king she despises, just to deny the lodge its quiet victory. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again, becomes her unspoken indictment of every elder mage in the room. If they insist on turning Ciri into a tool, they will have to go through her. Across all these paths, one trait remains. Yennefer will not be anyone's pawn for long. Not Emir's, not Philippa's, not even Ciri's. That refusal makes her unpredictable, the one piece on the board that never moves the same way twice. In a world where she never gets the daughter she once dreamed of, her choices become even harder to read. Does she still throw herself between this girl and the abyss, fighting for a soul that does not belong to her? Or, standing on the edge of yet another war, does she finally decide that the continent and everyone on it is no longer worth the cost? Small people in a big story, peasants, non-humans, and collateral fates. For a moment, all those councils and conspiracies fall away, and the story shrinks down to a single cottage door. On the other side is not a queen or a sorceress, but a farmer with frostbitten hands, listening to the distant thunder of Nilfgaardian hooves, and wondering which banner will burn his fields this year. Nilfgaard still rolls north, iron and discipline grinding over the map, but without Geralt and Ciri intersecting that march, the ripples land differently. A village that, in canon, might have seen a white-haired witcher and a gray-eyed girl ride through at dusk now sees only soldiers. No one slays the noon wraith haunting the crossroads. No one stands between a drunken squad of black cloaks and the elven family hiding in the barn. The Empire's rule is efficient on parchment, yet on the ground it becomes a patchwork of petty tyrannies, small commanders testing how far they can go when no inconvenient wanderer appears to say this matter is not up for debate. He begins to see it most clearly in the places that never make it into ballads. A dwarven mine in Mahakam, where in another life Geralt might have mediated a quarrel over taxes and tunnels, now simply collapses into violence. Human overseers push harder to meet Nilfgaard's quotas, and when the dwarves strike back, the response is simple: burn the camp, seize the ore, drive the survivors into the forests as bandits. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again. That is what Geralt would have thought, riding in by chance. In this world, he never hears about it at all. The lodge's fingers reach just as far, but they touch the small folk differently when Ciri is only a resource, not a person framed by a witcher's stubborn morality. Villages near suspected elder blood sites find their wells running strangely dry, their children waking from dreams of frozen seas. Then a sorceress arrives with soft words and hard eyes, requisitioning grain for research, and quietly removing any non-human witnesses. Let's explore the depths of it. For the lodge, a burned hamlet is an acceptable price for data on a girl who can walk between worlds. Non-humans feel the shift first. Without Ciri's occasional impulsive empathy and Geralt's habit of standing in the wrong doorway at the right time, pogroms in places like Novigrad and Oxenfurt face fewer interruptions. An elven guerrilla band that once might have been redirected, or at least spared a massacre, is now boxed in and annihilated along a forest road. The boy who would have watched a witcher argue with a priest about the worth of a dwarf's life instead watches the dwarf hanged, and he knows, from then on, exactly how much mercy costs. And over all of this, the white frost waits. For the average craftsman hammering horseshoes in Ard Carré, the distinction between dying beneath a Nilfgaardian banner, in a back alley purge, or in a sky gone white is almost academic. Death is death. Yet the path there still matters, because each deviation, each missing act of mercy, each unchallenged cruelty erodes what little remains of the continent's capacity to resist when the real cold comes. Here, the pattern breaks. Epic destinies are measured in maps, prophecies, the rise and fall of kingdoms. But the true cost of Ciri never meeting Geralt is not only in who wins the war or who commands her power, it is paid in 1,000 nameless lives we never see, in the villages where no witcher ever rides in and no one ever walks away. Morality in the dark. Is the AU Ciri more dangerous or less damaged? And yet, for a moment, we have to ask a quieter, crueler question. In this broken pattern where no witcher ever rides in, is Ciri herself actually better off? On the surface, the answer is tempting. No trial of grasses waiting in the dark halls of Kaer Morhen. No bruising drills with Lambert. No endless parries until her arms shake. No frozen courtyards where the boy from Cintra learns to fall and get up again. She is not hunted as the Witcher's ward, not dragged from battlefield to back alley because someone wants to hurt Geralt through her. Some of the sharpest edges of her canon suffering simply never form. The Wild Hunt may still chase an elder blood girl, but they are not drawn by a white-haired guardian, leaving tracks all across the continent. Still, pain does not vanish. It only changes shape. If Nilfgaard reaches her first, she is not a granddaughter, but an asset raised in marble corridors, where every kindness has an agenda. Emhyr offers affection, but it is threaded with strategy, with tutors who teach obedience before empathy. If the Lodge of Sorceresses gets there instead, she becomes a project, a womb for a future dynasty, praised for her potential as he can see Philippa's hand close around her life. And if she falls in with the rats, she escapes courts and councils, only to drown herself in blood and stolen coin, numbing the emptiness with speed and laughter that never reaches her eyes. In all of these paths, the damage is slower, more diffuse. No single night at Sodden, no single betrayal on Thanedd, just a long erosion of self as she begins to believe she is only what others can use. There is no gruff witcher saying, "This matter is not up for debate when it comes to her worth as a person." That makes her more dangerous. The elder blood is still there, perhaps stronger without witcher discipline to ground it. No months spent learning to breathe through fear, no medallion humming as he knows a lesion from a leshy. She has raw power, less control, and almost no moral anchors. A Ciri who slips between worlds without anyone ever teaching her when to stop is not merely a lost girl, she is an existential risk. One panicked jump in the wrong moment, and a city freezes, or a plague from another sphere walks through with her. Here lies the paradox. Geralt's presence paints a target on her back. His enemies become hers. Witcher politics drag her into wars she might otherwise skirt. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again. To watch another child drown alone in destiny. With him, she gains not just sword forms and monster lore, but the stubborn will to face the white frost and say no. His love makes her life harder and her soul stronger. So which wound do we choose? A Ciri safer in gilded cages, less scarred but more controlled, or a Ciri freer, more bloodied, yet capable of saying, for a moment, that the world will live because she decided it should. And if you had to live in one of those worlds, which version of her would you trust with the end of all things? Fate, chance, or choice, what really breaks when they don't meet? And that's where this world without Geralt and Ciri's meeting cuts the deepest, because in canon, their bond is wrapped in the language of destiny, of prophecies, and elder blood, and the law of surprise. Yet when you pull back for a moment, you can see how much of that inevitable fate hangs on breakable threads. A drunken banquet, a half-joking promise, a girl lost in the snow who happens to run into one particular witcher on one particular road. He begins to look at those threads one by one. Calanthe hides Ciri during the feast, trying to cheat destiny. Geralt walks away from Cintra, refusing to claim the child he's owed. Mages argue in closed rooms about when to intervene, who to back, which girl to weaponize. None of that is written in the stars. It's written in people's fear, pride, and sudden flashes of mercy. Let's explore the depths of it. This AU doesn't so much kill destiny as expose how much of it is just the accumulation of small, stubborn choices. When the law of surprise never truly cashes out, the world doesn't stop turning. Nilfgaard still marches, the white frost still looms, elder blood still sings in Ciri's veins. But now, every deviation shows what was really holding the continent together. Empress Ciri becomes a pawn-turned queen, ruling because a handful of advisors decide to protect her instead of sell her, because one guard looks the other way as she escapes an assassin, because she chooses to return to the throne instead of fleeing forever. Fate crowns her, but agency keeps her there. Rat Ciri is the opposite pressure. She spits in the face of every script, running with gutter thieves and butchers of the road. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again, is the silent refrain of every lord, mage, and emperor hearing rumors of a silver-haired girl tearing through their borders. As he hunts stories of her, each powerful player discovers that prophecy means very little when the prophesied refuses to stand still. Her rebellion shows that even a chosen one can choose to be something else. With the Lodge, Ciri is trapped inside other people's designs. They see a bloodline, not a person. They chart breeding plans, political marriages, controlled appearances at courts. Here, destiny feels most suffocating, yet it's built entirely from human calculation. This matter is not up for debate, they say, and in that sentence the mask slips. The gods aren't in control. Philippa Eilhart is. Across these branches, removing one relationship doesn't just bend a prophecy, it reveals how dependent the continent's survival is on individual acts of kindness, stubbornness, and love, on a witcher taking in a frightened child, on a sorceress choosing to be a mother instead of a handler. The real break in this what-if isn't some cosmic law shattering, it's two people failing to find each other in time, and all the choices that never get made because of it. And as the white frost draws nearer in each version, the question becomes painfully simple. Without that meeting, who is left to choose the world over themselves when it finally matters? Emotional core. Why this what-if hurts. In this darker branch of the story, the tragedy isn't just that the world burns faster, it's that the one quiet thing at the center of The Witcher, the unlikely warmth between a witcher, a sorceress, and a lost girl, never has the chance to exist. Strip away the monsters and the prophecies for a moment, and what remains is a tale about three people who were never meant to be a family, choosing each other anyway. He begins walking through that absence, as if through an empty keep. In canon, Kaer Morhen is loud with her laughter, Yennefer's sharp tongue, Lambert's complaints. Here, the fortress stays what it was built to be, a mausoleum for dying traditions. Vesemir still tends the fires, still trains the boys, but he can see there is no small figure swinging a wooden sword too big for her hands, no child of surprise stealing extra apples from the kitchen. The law of surprise breaks on Calanthe's will, and what it really breaks is the only home Ciri ever truly gets. Ciri herself becomes the sharpest wound, raised only by Calanthe, or swept early into Nilfgaard's shadow, or claimed by the Lodge. She is still elder blood, still the girl who can open paths between worlds. But without a witcher's steady patience, without those winters at Kaer Morhen, her power is all raw edge and no sheath. She runs from war, from prophecy, from the white frost itself, and this time no one is running with her. Let's explore the depths of it. Every portal she tears open is a decision made in fear, not in hard-won discipline learned on frosty training yards. Yennefer, too, is twisted by the missing thread. In the true timeline, the girl softens the sorceress's armor, forces her to be something more than ambition and old hurt. Here, Yen remains what Aretuza made her, brilliant, dangerous, and alone. She still bargains with kings, still snarls at their stupidity. Still, she was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again when men threatened to use magic as a leash. But there is no girl calling her mother in a half-joking, half-pleading tone. No second chance at a bond she thought she'd bartered away forever. For Geralt, the absence is quieter, but it cuts deeper. He keeps taking contracts, keeps pretending neutrality, keeps telling himself destiny is a story for bards. Yet as he passes burned villages and refugee camps from Sintra's fall, he knows something went wrong the night he walked away from Duny's banquet. This matter is not up for debate in his own mind. There was a path he did not take, and some part of him begins to feel the shape of the girl who should have been at his side. The real sting comes from the almosts. We know there is a world where they do share winters at Kaer Morhen, where Ciri sits by a campfire as he explains monster lore, where Yennefer brushes ash from the girl's hair after a fight. That memory of another timeline haunts this one, turning every missed road, every unsent letter, every unmade choice into something painfully familiar, because this isn't just fantasy, it brushes against a real fear. That one decision, one journey not taken, one risk refused, might have cost us the life we were meant to live. In imagining this world where they never quite find each other, we're not only mourning a story, we're testing our own. What do we truly value in Geralt, Yennefer, and Ciri's fragile, hard-won family, and what are we most afraid of losing when our own fates turn on a single, silent moment? Meta moment, why what if? Stories like this matter. For a moment, step back from the broken roads and burning kingdoms of this timeline, and look at what we're really doing here. On the surface, we've just stripped one Witcher out of one girl's life, but underneath, we've been pulling at the load-bearing beams of the entire saga. When we ask what happens if Geralt never meets Ciri, we're not trying to replace the story we know, we're putting it under pressure. Counterfactuals exist to show how fragile the so-called inevitable really is, how one missed law of surprise at Sintra, or one journey not taken to Sodden can send the continent veering toward a darker horizon. The boy who never arrives at a besieged castle, the girl who never hears the word Witcher, spoken with affection. Suddenly every choice in canon looks sharper, more deliberate. He begins to see it as he considers Calanthe hiding Ciri, or Nilfgaard's riders finding her first. In the books and games, that bond between Witcher and Child of Surprise feels destined, almost comforting in its certainty. Here, by denying it, we reveal how easily it might have failed, and that, paradoxically, can make the canonical path feel more precious, not less. If Ciri could just as easily have grown up a weapon of the Lodge, or a half-mad wanderer tearing holes in space and time with elder blood she never learned to control, then the winters at Kaer Morhen and the quiet lessons with Vesemir become small miracles of circumstance. Let's explore the depths of it. Take away Geralt's influence, and the White Frost is no longer a distant prophecy, but an unchecked trajectory, driven by a girl no one ever taught to stop running. Remove Yennefer's reluctant tenderness toward a child she never planned to love, and her arc risks collapsing back into pure ambition. Strip Ciri from the Witchers, and Kaer Morhen is not a half-reborn home, but a mausoleum where an order dies without ever passing its purpose on. If their bond is truly central, then removing it should destabilize everything around it, and in this world, it does. This is why these what-if paths matter. They force us to think in terms of causality and responsibility, not just fate. If Sintra's fall is fixed, who bears the weight when Ciri ends up in Nilfgaard's dungeons instead of on a Witcher's horse? If the Lodge breeds a dynasty from her elder blood, how much guilt rests on those who looked away when she was only a frightened child at a feast? Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again, except in this branch, he does, or he never even knows he should. Pattern interrupt. What if canon is not the real story, but just one fragile branch among countless others? This matter is not up for debate within the narrative. They tell us destiny chose. Yet from here, he can see that destiny is only a name we give to the path that survived. The rest of this video asks you to treat Geralt and Ciri's meeting not as a guarantee, but as a narrow escape, and to wonder what that says about the stories we cling to and the lives we're still in the process of choosing. Threading back, mapping the AU to key canon events. So now we thread our way back through the story we think we know, and for a moment, we hold canon and this fractured timeline side by side. Same milestones, different gravity, Sintra still falls. In canon, Ciri flees through fire and corpses to a string of near-miraculous rescues that eventually push her into Geralt's arms. Here, in the Empress Path, she is intercepted earlier by Nilfgaardian agents, her elder blood transformed into a political asset as much as a prophetic one, and the North never gets its lion cub to rally around. On the Rat's Path, she slips through the same burning streets, but no Witcher waits in the woods. She vanishes into bandit camps and brothels, emerging as Falka without ever learning another name for herself. In the Lodge Path, it is not destiny, but logistics that win. Sorceresses divert escape routes, and Ciri is quietly smuggled into Aretuza's Shadow Wings, a secret project rather than a lost princess. Thanedd still explodes. In canon, Geralt's presence, Yennefer's divided loyalties, and Ciri's uncontrolled portal tear the coup open and scatter them across worlds. Here, the Empress Ciri is far from the island, her absence giving the mages more room to act. The coup is cleaner, more calculated, and Nilfgaard's leverage grows as factions bargain over the girl they believe they can enthrone. On the Rat's track, Ciri is nowhere near the Conclave, which means her power doesn't rip the sky. The fighting is brutal but local, and the magical landscape becomes more chaotic later, when an untrained elder blood starts tearing holes in reality in back alleys instead of on a tower. Under the Lodge Path, Thanedd becomes their opening gambit. They move against Vilgefortz not to save a child, but to capture a resource, and mage dominance begins to harden into policy. The Lodge forms regardless. In canon, they are reactive, scrambling to seize Ciri after she has already slipped through too many hands. Here, in all three branches, they are proactive. They know the girl exists. They plan. In the Empress line, they negotiate marriages and regencies, embedding themselves in Nilfgaard's court as tutors and kingmakers. In the Rats line, they hunt her, failing again and again as she stays one step ahead, and each failure makes them harsher with lesser pawns. In the Lodge path, they succeed early. Ciri is raised in a world where sorceresses are not suspicious patrons, but absolute authorities. Let's explore the depths of it. Without Geralt, every road bends toward increased mage dominance, whether they sit on thrones, behind them, or in the shadows. Nilfgaard still marches. The campaigns into the north burn Temeria, Lyria, Aedirn in both timelines. Some kings still die on the same battlefields, but the meaning shifts. With an Empress Ciri, the wars become wars of unification, draped in the rhetoric of destiny, as the boy emperor's daughter legitimizes every annexation. With the Rats, Nilfgaard's victories are uglier and less stable, because the one person who could have been their symbol keeps slipping from their grasp, turning into a whispered curse in their war councils. With the Lodge, the Empire finds itself negotiating not only with crowned heads, but with a trans-kingdom cabal that controls teleportation, weather, and succession itself. He begins to see a pattern, greater Nilfgaardian leverage, but never absolute, always entangled with mages who think in centuries, and at the end of all roads, the White Frost still waits. In canon, Ciri faces it as a Witcher's ward, who has learned restraint, love, and the cost of leaving. Here, the Empress confronts it as a ruler calibrated to sacrifice worlds for her own, the Rat as a feral survivor who might choose destruction out of spite, the Lodge-raised seer as a weapon pointed by committee. The frost comes regardless. What changes is whether the girl at its heart believes she is loved, owned, or alone. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again, some future chronicler might tell himself as he writes, but this matter is not up for debate. So much changes, and yet the same wars burn, the same snows fall. So if the milestones remain, but their meanings twist without one bond in a forest, what does that say about where the Witcher's true center lies? And what happens when we finally follow that question to its end? Answering the big questions. Who wins this world? So we have our twisted milestones. Now, we have to answer the question the chronicler keeps dodging. In this world, without a Witcher in the forest, who actually gets Ciri, who actually wins, and what kind of weapon does she become? When we trace the most plausible branches, a pattern emerges. The northern kings move slow, bound by councils, borders, and their own fear of prophecy. Witchers have no bureaucracy at all, but they also have no eyes at every court. Nilfgaard and the Lodge do. They have spies in Sintra, agents on Skellige, listeners in every tavern where a frightened girl with ashen hair might ask for bread. In most paths, that reach matters more than destiny. Either Emhyr's men or Philippa's sisters close their hands around the Child of Surprise, long before any Kaer Morhen veteran even hears her name. If Nilfgaard claims her first, does the Empire simply win by default? On paper, he knows the answer should be yes. An empress with elder blood, an heir who can open paths through space and time, a living key to elven prophecy. No northern levy can match that. We can see the Emperor using her to end campaigns in a season, moving armies past fortresses, as he once moved chess pieces. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again. Some northern ruler might tell himself as he stares at a map with too much black ink on it, but this victory is never clean. A Ciri raised as imperial asset is also a Ciri who witnesses every compromise, every quiet execution ordered in her name. As he signs another decree, Emhyr can see the risk. A girl who can flee not just a throne room, but the entire timeline. One act of rebellion from her, one uncontrolled burst, and supply lines vanish, fleets are misplaced, history tears. Nilfgaard gains the greatest advantage, but it is an advantage balanced on a fault line. Under the Lodge, the balance tilts in a different way. Philippa and the others train her power with clinical precision, strip out as much childishness as they can, and replace it with doctrine. The boy in the northern story, who learned restraint from Ned, has no equivalent here. There is no Geralt to stand in front of Ciri and say no further. Her raw destructive potential grows. Her moral compass weakens, bent by a dozen competing agendas, until she begins to see people as positions on a board more than faces in a crowd. Is she more dangerous without Geralt? In almost every branch, yes. Without that stubborn, unconditional regard, the world loses the one person who treats her as a child before a weapon. She still runs from war, prophecy, and monsters, but now, for a moment, there is no one running with her, no one to pull her back. When the white frost whispers that one clean, terrible choice could end it all, does she still choose to save the world? Here, the tree splits again. In some paths, she finds a substitute center, a Skellige shield maiden who refuses to fear her, a weary mage who sees the girl before the bloodline, a band of rats who improbably become something closer to a family than a gang, where she finds even a fragment of what Geralt offered. Sacrifice remains possible. She might still ride into the frost, still turn her back on a throne, still close the door on her own happiness because someone, somewhere, believed in the girl and not the prophecy. But in the darker branches, the ones where Nilfgaard's tutors or the Lodge's lectures are the only voices she hears, that choice becomes less likely. She survives, she endures, she may even rule. The world goes on, but it is colder, more brittle, threaded through with unstable paths only she can walk, and no witcher waiting at a cottage door to call her home. So, as we step out of the diagrams and back into the story, one truth stands out. Remove Geralt, and the continent does not end overnight, yet every victory grows sharper edges. Every prophecy loses its last safeguard. The analytical map is almost complete now. All that remains is to look at what this says about the bond we took for granted, and what it costs the world when that bond never forms. Closing synthesis, the world where they never found each other. So now we leave the charts behind and step into the world itself, not one branch, but all of them at once. For a moment, the continent holds its breath, and we can see what it becomes when that quiet, stubborn love between witcher and child never has a chance to exist. In one vision, Empress Ciri sits on a black throne in Nilfgaard, boots resting on marble veined like dried blood. The banners are orderly, the court hushed, the empire efficient. She can see the map spread before her, borders redrawn by her word alone, and yet the hall feels cavernous. There is no gruff voice at her shoulder mocking etiquette, no witcher muttering about how crowns only make better targets. Victories come, but each one lands with a dull, metallic echo. Another flicker, another road. Rat Ciri rides through fire and smoke, a scarf over her mouth, hooves hammering through burning villages as she laughs too loudly, too long. The boy whose purse she steals will live, but only because she grows bored. She knows dimly that there should have been someone to pull her back from the edge, someone to tell her that killing and surviving are not the same thing. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again, that invisible mentor who never arrives, so the lesson never comes. High above, in a tower guarded by wards and ambition, Lodge Ciri stares out over a city that does not know its queen. Philippa's hand rests on her shoulder as he begins another lecture on duty and bloodlines. Ciri listens, eyes on the horizon, feeling power coil beneath her skin, raw elder blood humming, without Kaer Morhen's scars to ground it. There are no snowball fights in a ruined courtyard, no Vesemir correcting her stance, no Yennefer and Geralt arguing over how to raise her as she smirks between them. The magic is stronger here, the girl more polished, but the person at the center is thinner, more brittle. And somewhere far below all of this, Geralt walks alone down a muddy road. No extra bedroll, no small mismatched saddle, just Roach, the path, and contracts that blur together. He knows there was a hole left in his life the night Calanthe lied, but he has no name for it. Monsters die, kings fall, mages scheme. The world survives, or it doesn't, in ways that feel strangely accidental, as if the last chance for earned grace and real redemption was quietly written out of the script. Let's explore the depths of it for a moment. Empress or fugitive, weapon or heir, Ciri still moves through prophecy, still brushes against the white frost and the designs of elves and emperors. Yet without that campsite banter, without the training yard arguments, without the long hard road where a witcher and a child choose each other again and again, the tone of the entire world shifts. Colder, sharper, less human. This matter is not up for debate in these branches. Destiny becomes logistics, not love. The continent endures, but with fewer songs worth singing. And as we step back from these darker roads, the question that remains is simple. Now that we've seen what breaks when they never meet, what do we do with the renewed appreciation and the unsettling new questions it gives us about the story we thought we knew? Your turn, choosing a timeline and a legacy. So now, the question turns back to you. We have walked through courts without witchers, battlefields without a white wolf, and thrones where the child of destiny is a tool instead of a daughter. Let's explore the depths of it from the other side of the screen. If this world never gives Ciri a Geralt, which branch do you choose to live in? For a moment, set aside canon, stand in front of these paths, and pick one. Do you choose Empress Ciri, ruling from a rebuilt Sintra, or the White Gold Tower, the continent welded together under banners and treaties rather than tavern stories? Do you choose Rat Ciri, half legend, half nightmare, her elder blood spilling out in alleyway magic and roadside ambushes? Or perhaps Lodge Ciri, raised in marble halls and rune-lit chambers, the proud experiment of sorceresses who see her as a dynasty more than a girl? Some of you will even hold to the harshest path, an early death Ciri, the prophecy cut short so the world survives without her. As he listens to these branches being laid out, a careful viewer can see the trade-offs in each, so speak them aloud. Are you choosing the road that minimizes suffering for the greatest number, even if it crushes Ciri under duty? Are you chasing maximum stability, a continent that does not burn every generation, even if it means accepting an empire built on fear of the White Frost? Or do you favor the lines where her freedom is preserved, where she runs with the rats or vanishes between worlds, and the kingdoms simply have to endure the storm she leaves behind? Now turn the blade the other way. Which Geralt, or absence of him, feels most honest to you? The legendary loner, who remains a rumor on the path, never dragged into courts or prophecies, his life reduced to contracts, potions, and the occasional warm bed? Or the reluctant father we know from canon, the man who swears he wants nothing and yet keeps circling back to a child who was not supposed to be his? Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again. Every time destiny threw Ciri in front of him, he stepped in. If you erase that, what does it say about the stories you find compelling? The tales of isolated competence, or the ones where power is measured by who you choose to protect? When you answer, try not to stop at, "This is cool," or "This is darkest." Tell me which branch feels right, or at least honest, for the Witcher's world, and for your own sense of morality. If Empress Ciri is your choice, is it because he knows the North needs a single will to survive the next war? If Rat Ciri calls to you, is it because you believe some people cannot be safely folded into kingdoms at all? And if you quietly favor her dying early, is that mercy, or fear of what she becomes if she lives? This matter is not up for debate inside the fiction. Each branch simply unfolds. But here, between us, it is absolutely up for debate. Leave your branch, your Geralt, and your reasoning in the comments. This AU is just one lens on the law of surprise snapping in half. There are 100 other fractures we could follow, and in the final part, we will open the door to those other timelines, and to the next story you want to pull apart. CTA, if destiny misses once, what else could change? So if one broken promise can unravel the law of surprise, if one missed night on a stormy road can turn a witcher and a child into strangers, then for a moment he can see how fragile all of this really is. Not just destiny and the continent's sagas, but the stories we choose to follow here, on this side of the screen. If walking through this world, where Geralt never finds Ciri, made the North feel colder, Nilfgaard's banners darker, or Calanthe's pride sharper, then let that sit with you as he asks something simple. If this single fracture made you look at the Witcher's wars, prophecies, and quiet campfires differently, tap the like button and share this timeline with someone who still thinks destiny is unbreakable. One click, one share, and this version of events does not vanish into the smoke as quickly, because this matter is not up for debate. If you want more long-form what-ifs that treat fantasy politics and prophecy with the same weight as a girl's fear in a burning city, they only exist if you call them into being. Subscribe if you haven't already, and he knows you're not just chasing monsters and sword fights. You're here for the slow, uncomfortable questions. What happens to Elder Blood when no Witcher stands between it and the White Frost? What a boy king in Nilfgaard's court does when he begins to hear Ciri's name whispered as a weapon, not a person. Let's explore the depths of it together. In the comments, leave the next fracture you want to follow. What if Yennefer keeps her fertility, and the Lodge no longer sees Ciri as the only womb that matters? What if Nilfgaard never rises, and the lion cub of Cintra grows up bored in a peaceful court, her power turning inward instead of outward? What if the Witchers rebuild Kaer Morhen, and Ciri is not their last surprise, but the first stone in a new order? Or step beyond this saga entirely, compare her to Daenerys in another world, to Frodo, to Aang, who bears their burden better when destiny slips. Still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again, to let these questions die unasked, these branches unwalked. Every comment you leave, every theory you argue for or against, is its own law of surprise, a tiny, unseen choice that decides which story the algorithm drags back from the brink and which one drowns. As he scrolls through your branches, he begins to map out the next road. And remember the line that opened all of this. In one world, a witcher and a child meet by chance and save a continent. In this one, they pass like ghosts in the smoke. Which world you carry with you after this video, that choice is yours. In the final part, we'll see what happens when that choice is pushed one step further, and destiny itself starts to push back. End card reflection, staying in the frost a moment longer. So stay here with her for a moment. The end card comes up, the music drops to something thin and distant, and we hold on a single image. Ciri alone before the white frost. No roar of battle behind her, no Witcher's hand on her shoulder. Just a girl, a blade, and a sky that is more absence than color as he would have seen it in his worst dreams. The snow at her feet is unmarked, no second set of tracks, no heavy limping Witcher strides circling to put himself between her and the storm. She can see only her own footprints stretching back into the dark, a trail of choices made without anyone there to argue, to guide, to say this matter is not up for debate when she reaches for something too dangerous to touch. Lost family presses on her spine, altered destinies whisper in the wind. Think of everything that led her here. A banquet in Cintra, where the law of surprise should have bound a Witcher to a crying infant, a queen who thought she could outplay destiny and keep the girl hidden, a continent that watched Cintra burn and assumed the line was broken. Each small act of courage or cowardice echoed forward until the white frost opened and there was no one left to stand beside her. In another telling, Geralt is there. He begins as a gruff guardian, dragging her to Kaer Morhen, teaching her how to move, how to listen, how not to die. Yennefer adds fire and discipline. The Lodge circles like hawks, Nilfgaard schemes, and still, he was hardly going to sit by and allow this to happen again. A child left alone with the end of the world. Let's explore the depths of it by remembering that contrast, even as this screen fills with recommended paths. If you want to keep walking this colder road, the Elder Blood Deep Dive is waiting, tracing how Ciri's power tangles with elven prophecy and the white frost in canon, and how much more brittle it becomes without a Witcher to ground her. Or step into the broader tapestry with the What If the Child of Destiny Never Reached Kaer Morhen playlist, where Nilfgaard's wars, the Lodge's breeding plans, and the fate of Cintra and Kaer Morhen all shift around an empty saddle. You can, of course, click away to something lighter, a different story, a different world, but staying here, just a heartbeat longer, is its own quiet choice. It means acknowledging that this version hurts for a reason, that when a girl walks alone into the frost, the whole continent pays the price. So let the music fade, let the image dim, and hold on to this last thought as the screen goes black. Somewhere, in another telling, a Witcher finds a girl in the ashes, and everything is different.